My name is Samantha. I'm 38 years old and live in Austin, Texas, a city lively enough to hide the loneliness of daughters who always have to be strong simply because there's no other choice. I'm a financial advisor. My clients call me the one who steadies the ship in a storm, but within my own family, I'm just the responsible older sister, the one always expected to give way to my reckless younger brother, Tyler. If I had a dime for every time my mother said, "He's just confused, you have to understand him," I could have retired at 30. From an early age, our roles in the family were assigned without audition. I was the serious, quiet eldest daughter who made the adults proud. Tyler, 3 years younger, was the boy with teary eyes and a disarming smile, forgiven no matter how much trouble he caused. He once burned down the garage playing with a lighter, stole the class fund, dropped out of college halfway, yet was always excused with, "He's just trying to find himself." And me? When I earned a full scholarship, my dad just nodded. "Well, that's expected." When I worked part-time to pay off student loans, my mom only said, "You're strong, a little struggle won't kill you." It was as if every good thing I did was just my duty, while every mistake Tyler made was a forgivable accident. I still remember the night Tyler called me in tears, confessing he was nearly $30,000 in debt from online sports betting. I remember my mom's heavy sigh when I said I couldn't lend him money. "You work in finance? Can't you help him just a little?" she said, her voice cracking as if I were heartless for letting my brother drown. And Tyler? He coolly texted me his bank account info without even a thank you. Caught in that cycle of emotional exhaustion, the only person who ever truly saw me, listened to me, and believed in me was my grandmother, Margaret. That tiny woman once ran a furniture manufacturing company solo for 20 years after her husband passed. No one expected a 50-year-old widow to revive the family business, especially in a time when ambitious women were still considered too much. But she did, and she did it well. Grandma Margaret didn't speak often, but when she did, her words stuck. I'll never forget the summer I was 15 when I skipped camp to help her audit some ledgers. She didn't smile or praise me. She simply said, "You've got the mind for big things. More importantly, you're not afraid of responsibility. That's what the world needs." From then on, I spent every summer at her workshop. While my parents and Tyler went on vacations, baseball games, and family reunions, I sat in Grandma's dusty old office learning how to read balance sheets, how to ask the right questions, and how to hold my ground even when others called it stubbornness. She taught me that financial independence is the first, and maybe only, kind of freedom a woman should fiercely protect. When I turned 18, she gave me a gift I've never forgotten, an investment account in my name, seated with exactly $3,500. I had helped her tally that summer. "You earned it, so you'll know how to grow it," she said. And I did. I used it to launch my journey, earning a degree in finance, then an MBA, and later my investment advisor certification. While Tyler bounced from one community college to another and burned through cash on startup ideas without even a business plan, I worked my way up to partner at the third largest financial consulting firm in Austin. But success isn't a thick enough shield to protect you from the knives that come from behind, especially when those knives are held by the ones you love. I don't know exactly when my parents started seeing me as an ATM. Maybe it was when I bought my first house or when I finished paying off my student loans. But I knew that vision had solidified into an ugly truth the day I received the news of Grandma Margaret's passing, and that her entire estate was about to fall into the very hands she once warned me never to trust. Margaret passed away on a March morning, when late-season snow still dusted the edges of the roads. I was in San Antonio giving a talk at an investment conference when my phone buzzed. The voice on the other end, her attending doctor, softened the moment I confirmed who I was. She passed at 6:13 a.m. in her sleep, no pain. I froze in the corridor of a 5-star hotel as if someone had just punched me in the chest. I returned to Austin in silence. The red brick house where she'd lived alone for nearly 30 years felt colder than ever. The old photo frame still sat neatly on the fireplace mantel. Me in my graduation gown, her arm around my shoulder. Her smile tilted like she already knew I'd go farther than she ever dared to dream. The funeral was simple, with only around 20 close friends and family. Tyler showed up nearly an hour late, blaming traffic, wearing a brand new leather jacket. My parents, Carl and Linda, sat in the front row, trying to appear sorrowful, though my mother kept glancing at the family lawyer. The will reading was held 4 days later in her third-floor office on Congress Avenue. The lawyer, Raymond Knox, a longtime friend of Margaret's, was bald, wore a turtleneck, and had a calm but razor-sharp presence. Once we were seated, he said gently, "This will was last updated 6 months before Margaret passed. She instructed me to ensure every word remained exactly as she wrote it." My father nodded. My mother gave a tight smile. Tyler yawned. And then Raymond began. "Margaret left me, and only me, the core of her estate, the historic house near Lake Travis, the family heirloom jewelry collection, and an investment portfolio with a market value close to $2.1 million. That inheritance came with 3 conditions. The house could never be sold and must be preserved as a family landmark. The investment portfolio was to fund a nonprofit scholarship in her name, and the jewelry was mine to keep, as she wrote, to remember that the women in this family have never bowed. Tyler received a trust of $25,000, restricted for educational use or to start a legally registered business. The trustee in charge? Me. My parents were left a 2008 Cadillac, one Margaret hadn't driven in 4 years, along with a few antique ceramic pieces and a set of philosophy books she read in her youth. No one in the room said a word. I didn't smile, but I felt my heart pound with a steady rhythm, as if she had placed her hand on my shoulder from somewhere beyond, whispering, "You did it." My mother was the first to break the silence. "There must be some mistake. Margaret would never abandon her son like this." Raymond didn't respond. He simply flipped to the next page. She wrote clearly, "Carl and Linda are people I love, but I do not trust them to preserve what I've built. I've seen them indulge their son to the point of destroying him." Tyler's face turned crimson. "What? That old woman couldn't—" Raymond read on, never looking up. "As for Tyler, if he truly wants to change, he'll need to learn how to work with responsibility and understand that no one is obligated to pay for his laziness." My father looked like he wanted to speak but held back. My mother stood abruptly, grabbing Raymond's sleeve. "You can't let one daughter take everything like this. This will be contested." Raymond gently removed her hand. "This is a legally binding will, signed by 3 witnesses and notarized. You're absolutely free to hire counsel to contest it. But I advise you to think carefully, because I also have a voice recording of Margaret explaining every single decision in her own words." I hadn't spoken a word through the entire reading, but now every eye turned to me, not with sympathy, but the desperate glint of people watching a prize slip from their hands. I looked directly at my mother and said calmly, "She already knew, and she believed I'd protect what mattered most to her." Tyler mumbled something under his breath. My mother collapsed back into her seat, breathing hard. My father said nothing, but his eyes shifted, calculating. Raymond closed the folder. "That concludes today's session. Further details will be distributed to relevant parties. And remember, what matters isn't what she left behind, but why she chose to leave it that way." I walked out of that office with a strange clarity. Not joy, not grief, just certainty. I hadn't just inherited assets, I had inherited a battle. And the people I called family weren't done with me yet. The message from my mother came in on a Monday afternoon, just as I was in a 19th floor conference room, about to present a portfolio reallocation strategy to a major client. "Our family needs to meet urgently this weekend. 3 p.m. at home. No excuses." No explanation, no warm greeting, just a command. I looked up from my screen, that familiar sting rising in my chest like acid. The kind of invitation everyone knows is really a tribunal disguised as family. I forwarded the text to Olivia, my closest friend since college and now my colleague. She replied with just one sentence. Looks like it's your turn again. I hadn't told anyone, but ever since the will reading, I'd noticed a few odd things. Margaret's former secretary, who had helped her manage financial records for over a decade, suddenly called to say someone had been asking repeatedly about the estate. A week later, Wallace, our family accountant, texted me privately. Someone tried to request statements from her investment portfolio. I'd decline, but be careful. The tension began to thicken like lead in the air. My father, Carl, formerly a corporate legal advisor for a construction firm, was never one to give up easily when control was at stake. My mother, Linda, she never accepted that I had surpassed Tyler, even in her imagination. And Tyler, the guy who burned through $70,000 in scholarship money in just 8 months, wasn't about to walk away from a fortune without a fight. By Saturday afternoon, I was driving back to our old neighborhood. The same 3-bedroom wooden house where I grew up now looked gray and hollow, like the people inside. Tyler had parked his new Jeep in the driveway. Clearly, money wasn't an issue for him, at least not when he didn't have to earn it. As I stepped inside, my mother was already waiting in the kitchen, wearing a burgundy dress and dark red lipstick, not to welcome, but to perform. My father sat at the dining table, poker-faced, swirling bourbon in a glass. Tyler lounged on the sofa, legs up on the coffee table like he owned the place. "You're late," my mother said, voice tight as piano wire. "I'm on time," I replied, still standing. My father cleared his throat. "Samantha, this isn't an easy conversation, but it needs to happen." I folded my arms. "I'm listening." My mother pulled out a chair, sitting directly across from me. "The family is in crisis. Tyler's facing serious problems. Some of your investment accounts could help us get through this." I looked her in the eye. What kind of crisis? And what does that have to do with the assets Margaret left to me? Tyler sneered. "That was Grandma's. It's a family inheritance. She just put your name on it because she thought you'd manage it better, not to hoard it for yourself." I kept my voice steady. "So, your plan is what? I hand it all over so you can blow it gambling again?" My dad interjected, trying to sound calm. "No one's saying you should hand it all over. We're proposing a family trust. Pool the assets, I'd manage it, distribute fairly. You'd still get your share, of course. But what matters is the collective good." I gave a small laugh. "Sounds familiar? Like when you sold Grandpa's car without telling me?" Silence fell. My mother's hands tightened around each other on the table. "Let's not bring up old wounds. We needed the cash back then, to send Tyler to rehab." "Voluntary rehab, 3 weeks long with spa treatments and a hot tub," I interrupted. "And who paid that bill?" "I did." Tyler slammed his hand on the table. "You always throw that stuff in our faces. You think you're so superior. Without Mom and Dad, you'd be nothing." "Wrong. I am who I am because of Margaret, not because of you." I pulled my phone from my purse and opened a file. Want to hear her words again? The part where she explains why she left everything to me? I also have the video from the night she updated her will. My father stood up abruptly, his face red. "You trying to threaten us with that? We're family!" Family doesn't secretly file legal requests to transfer ownership of someone else's estate. I tossed a thick packet onto the table, photocopies of emails, letters, and draft lawsuits, all signed by my dad. My mother froze. Tyler turned pale. I grabbed my bag. "I've warned you. This inheritance wasn't meant to be looted. I'm not betraying anyone. I'm protecting what the woman I loved most spent her whole life building. If any of you push further, don't bother calling this a family anymore." And I walked out, leaving behind a silence so sharp, you didn't need to slam the door to hear exactly what was shattering. Grief. I hadn't planned to go as far as rummaging through my parents' house, but after that family meeting, my instincts screamed like a fire alarm. Something was off. Not just their tone or my father's calculating glances. It was the way they spoke. Too smooth. Too rehearsed, like the script had already been written. like I was the final pawn to be removed. 3 days later, I met with George, a former colleague who used to be a legal analyst at a real estate firm my father once worked with. I asked just one question. Is my father trying to restructure any assets under my name? George hesitated at first, but after I mentioned a few project names, he nodded. I can't give you internal documents, he said, but I know he's been working with a private law office in Round Rock on a new family trust. It felt like something cold and heavy poured down my spine. The next morning, I took a chance and went to my parents' office, claiming I needed to find my original birth certificate, something they'd held onto for years. My father's office hadn't changed since I was a teenager. Walnut desk, file cabinets with mechanical combo locks, dusty old bookshelves, and the smell of printer ink mixed with worn leather. I knew the drawer layout by heart. I used to be punished by being forced to reorganize them in middle school. In the drawer, labeled FP, I found a black folder handwritten with Brookshire Consolidated Trust, Internal Draft, Confidential. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it. I opened the folder, hands shaking uncontrollably. Inside were notarized copies of assets registered under my name, Margaret's house on Lake Travis, a list of shares in the investment portfolio, and even a photo of the family jewelry appraisal. But what nearly made me sick was the internal allocation plan. Priority 1, resolve Tyler's critical debts. I kept reading. Under the section titled Plan to Handle Dispute with Samantha, there were 3 bullet points. Emotional persuasion, leverage the concept of family obligation. Invoke moral duty based on the deceased's presumed wishes. If all else fails, file a petition challenging Margaret's mental competence at time of will drafting. Basis light sedatives documented in 2021 medical file. I stood frozen. They were going to paint Margaret, a sharp, lucid woman until her final days, as mentally incompetent just to dismantle her final wishes. Quietly, I took photos of everything with my phone. Then, I carefully restored everything to its place and left the house before my mother got home from yoga. On the way back, I called my private attorney, Annette Davis, an estate and trust protection specialist. Her voice dropped when I finished telling her everything. This is more serious than I thought, she said. Samantha, they're not just after the assets, they're laying legal groundwork. What should I do first? I asked. Lock everything down. Immediately, transfer it all into an irrevocable trust under your sole control. And if necessary, go public. Family or not, this is inheritance abuse. 3 days later, I signed the documents establishing the Eleanor Margaret Trust named after my grandmother. Every asset, the house, the investment portfolio, the jewelry, even her personal keepsakes, was legally transferred into the trust. Sole trustee, me. Irrevocable, indivisible, untouchable by anyone, blood or not. That night, I got a message from my mother. Samantha, what have you done? We were just trying to help Tyler. You could have shared a little. It's family. Don't take things so far. They stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back, I'm not the one who took it too far. You and Dad did. I just finally learned how to swim. That night, I slept deeply. But in my dream, I saw Margaret standing on the porch, wind off Lake Travis tossing her silver hair. She didn't say a word, just nodded once, then turned and walked inside, as if finally she could rest. Annette Davis wasn't the kind of attorney you'd see on highway billboards or late-night TV ads. She worked quietly but precisely, like a surgical scalpel. No wasted motion, no emotional interference. As soon as I sent her the photos I'd taken from my father's office, she said just 3 words. We start now. We had exactly 4 days before the second family meeting. One I suspected was nothing more than a trap. This time, it wouldn't be theater. My parents would walk into that room with a legal ambush fully loaded, ready to force my signature the moment they saw an opening. Annette moved like she'd been preparing for this her whole life. She requested the original estate documents from Raymond, Margaret's attorney, to cross-reference every clause. She contacted two of the largest asset management firms in Austin, an independent valuation team in Vermont, and a digital security company specializing in asset access encryption. All I had to do was sign, sign, and sign. By Wednesday, we completed the formation of the Eleanor Margaret Legacy Trust, an irrevocable trust where I was the grantor, beneficiary, and sole trustee. The nearly $2 million in investments were split across 3 independent accounts under the trust name, with third-party oversight. And the Lake Travis house was reclassified as a personal cultural asset in tax filings, marked with a condition, cannot be sold or mortgaged in any form for the next 25 years. The jewelry collection, 47 pieces, some dating back to 1893, was deposited in a private bank vault in downtown Austin, registered with a unique code only I possessed. Friday afternoon, Annette and I met with Raymond at his office. A worn oak round table, sunlight slanting through a dusted window pane. He looked over the neatly clipped file in front of him and gave a slow nod. You've done what few have the courage to do, Samantha. Not just protect assets, but defend legacy and dignity. I stayed silent. Sometimes I wasn't sure if I was being brave or just building a fortress because I didn't trust anyone anymore. Do you think they'll pivot? I asked Nanette quietly. There's no legal angle left. They can scream, guilt trip, or play the victim in the media, but legally, they're locked out. She glanced at me, reading the worry rising beneath my calm. As long as you stay steady, tomorrow. I nodded, but I knew logic was never their last move. Saturday morning, I arrived at my parents' house on time. I didn't bring much, just a simple leather bag with the original trust contract and an updated asset statement. The house was quieter than usual, as if it too were holding its breath for the quake ahead. Tyler opened the door. He looked me over like he was recalibrating my character. Come in, he muttered, turning his back. The living room had been tidied unnaturally. My mother wore a dark gray suit. My father sat ready with a file in front of him, joined by a man I didn't recognize, clearly their new attorney. He didn't offer a name, just a curt nod. We won't waste time, my father began. You already know what we want. I sat, opened my bag, and said nothing. We've prepared a new asset management structure, he continued, merging Margaret's inheritance into a unified family system. You'll have partial control, of course, but oversight will remain with us, the senior heads of family. My mother nodded. This is fair. Tyler deserves a chance to rebuild. We need unity. I slid the file to the center of the table. Too late. My father frowned. Margaret's assets have been fully transferred to the Eleanor Margaret Legacy Trust, irrevocable. No one but me has authority. Their lawyer grabbed the folder, flipping pages quickly. I saw his brow furrow. His lips tightened. This is will manipulation, my mother hissed. No, I said calmly. This was executed exactly per Margaret's instructions, witnessed, notarized, and legally binding. Tyler slammed the table. You think you're some kind of princess? Mom's gone. You don't get to keep it all. I looked directly at my brother. I'm not keeping it all. I'm keeping it intact, the way she wanted. Their lawyer finally spoke, voice low. No loopholes. They've locked every door. My father stood, fists clenched. It isn't over. I stood too. I know, but I'm done. The air in the living room was so thick, I could feel every heartbeat of the people sitting there. What game are you playing? He snapped, jumping up and pointing straight at me. You turning this house into some cheap soap opera? I didn't answer. I just looked straight at my parents, the same people who had used the word family to manipulate me over and over. Now they sat there, faces pale, fists clenched. But I knew that look. They weren't heartbroken, they were furious, because they had lost control. You've broken every principle this family was built on, my mother said, her voice trembling but cold. Since when do you think you're above everyone else? Since the day I realized I don't owe my life to covering up the mistakes this family refuses to admit, I replied, eyes steady. I'm not a walking wallet. Samantha, my father growled, you're insulting the very people who raised you. Everything you have is because of Margaret, I cut in. You're the ones who blocked me from attending college out of state, who told me finance isn't for girls. You're the ones who ignored my accomplishments, but cashed every check I sent as if it was your right. Tyler snatched the file from their lawyer, waving it in my face. You're a damn snake. That inheritance was for the family. You were just holding it. No. I pulled out a copy of the will and placed it on the table. She left it to me. Explicitly. With no clause about sharing. Because she knew if she split it, it'd all end up in a casino or your next 3-minute coffee shop startup. Don't act like you're clean, Tyler screamed, leaping to his feet. When you made it big, did you share? Did you think about us? Or were you just polishing your perfect daughter act so she'd love you more? I held my ground. She loved me because I didn't lie. Because I didn't run from responsibility. Because I didn't borrow and expect others to bail me out. And what about me? His voice cracked, eyes bloodshot. If you don't help, they'll come after me. They'll destroy me. Is that what you want? I rose slowly. I don't want that. But I also won't stand by and watch her legacy burn just because our parents were too weak to say 2 words. That's enough. My mother walked toward me, her eyes pleading, no longer angry, just a twisted mix of fear, guilt, and control woven into every breath. He's your brother. He made mistakes, yes, but he's still family. You can't punish all of us for a few bad choices. I gently pulled her hand from my arm. No one's being punished. I'm just done being complicit. Their lawyer had gone silent, flipping through the documents. After a long pause, he shook his head and turned to my father. Miss Samantha's legal team secured everything under an irreversible trust. There are no errors in execution. I don't recommend pursuing litigation. It would be expensive and almost certainly a losing battle. My father looked at him, then at me. His eyes no longer angry. They were filled with bitter disappointment, like a man defeated by his own chess piece. You're just like your mother, he whispered, teeth clenched. Selfish to the core. No, I said. The difference is I won't sacrifice myself to protect something that's already rotten. My mother clasped her hands together. Samantha, we're a family. Don't turn this into a wound that can't be healed. I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. I'm not the one who cut. You did. I walked out of that house, leaving behind a family not grieving the loss of a daughter, but a puppet, one they could no longer control. The morning after the family meeting, I got a strange phone call while sitting on the porch of my lake house on Lake Travis, a cup of coffee still untouched in my hand. The number showed a Galveston area code, a place I had never even been to. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Is this Samantha? A deep, slightly raspy male voice asked. This is Thomas, your father's younger brother. I shot up straight. Uncle Thomas, a name my family had avoided for over 2 decades. I vaguely remembered a tall man with a kind smile who rarely showed up at Thanksgiving or Christmas. My mom used to say he didn't fit in with the family. My dad always dodged the topic, and now he was calling me? I know you have every reason not to trust me, he said, calmly, not trying to sound overly familiar. But I think it's time you knew the whole truth. Can you meet me? Today? Blue Magnolia Cafe on 6th Street. The cafe was tucked between 2 worn-out buildings, with soft yellow lighting and Polaroid pictures all over the walls. I walked in and recognized him instantly, still the same build, but older than I remembered, more gray in his hair, but the eyes. They were the same ones I'd seen as a child, lost in the middle of fake family gatherings. But you look more like Margaret than I ever expected, he said, with a soft smile. I'm sorry I couldn't make it to the funeral. I nodded. No time for pleasantries. You said there's something I need to know. He nodded and placed a thin folder on the table. Your family went bankrupt 4 years ago. They have nothing left. Everything you've seen, the cars, the house, the clothes, the vacations, has been funded by debt, credit cards, and advance mortgage draws. My face flushed. Are you sure? I'm sure, Uncle Thomas said, pushing the file toward me. I've got copies of the mortgage documents, bank statements, and credit reports from someone I trust in the industry. Even the house you grew up in. It's been refinanced twice. The last time was to cover an $80,000 debt Tyler racked up. I flipped through the folder, the numbers blurred together. Balances below minimums, credit card debts in the hundreds of thousands, and the worst of all, a loan from a non-traditional lender charging triple the federal interest limit. I looked at him. Who did they borrow from? He looked straight into my eyes. I got of Brentwell. I nearly dropped my coffee. Brentwell wasn't unfamiliar to anyone who worked in finance in Texas. It wasn't a bank. It was a group, a front for loan sharks, debt collectors, and in some cases, forced asset seizures when borrowers couldn't pay up. When did Tyler get involved? I asked, my throat tight. When he opened that lounge downtown Austin. Your parents believed in his business plan and pulled out their entire retirement savings to invest? When the bar started losing money, Tyler panicked, took out high-interest loans to cover payroll and keep the place running, then borrowed again to pay off the first loans. It spiraled from there. I sat in silence. Margaret knew some of it, he continued. But she didn't tell you everything. She didn't want to worry you. Still, she knew that if she passed away without taking action, everything she left behind would be dragged down with them. It all made sense now. The pieces I had tried to put together, little red flags, gut feelings, finally clicked. My parents weren't just greedy, they were desperate. So their goal wasn't just to save Tyler, I muttered, was to save themselves. Uncle Thomas nodded. They need you to agree to move the assets into their name so they can remortgage or sell to pay off the others. If you don't, Brentwell won't sit back quietly. Don't be surprised if you start getting followed or pressured indirectly. I stared at him, trying to suppress the fear rising in me. You say this like you've seen it happen. He looked away, eyes darkening. I lost almost everything once because I believed family comes first. But family doesn't mean sinking with someone else's mistakes. I clenched my fists. I won't let them steal what Margaret tried to protect. He gave a faint smile. Then you'll need to stay a step ahead. Not just legally, you need to prepare for what they'll do when Plan A fails. I nodded, every nerve in my body fully awake. The second meeting was held right at my lake house on Lake Travis on a drizzly Sunday afternoon. This time, I was the one who sent the invitations. No longer was it a script they wrote to manipulate me. This time, I was the one writing the script, and the rules were mine. I arranged a long walnut table in the middle of the living room, the brass pendant light casting a soft reflection off the polished surface. To my right sat Annette, my lawyer, calm and precise like a Swiss watch. To my left was Uncle Thomas, quiet but steady, like the last pillar in this family I could still trust. My parents arrived together, striding into the house as if they hadn't been shut down in the previous meeting. My mother wore a long beige wool coat, her face bare, seemingly to send a message that she no longer cared about appearances. My father wore new glasses, holding a leather briefcase, probably still clinging to hope for a deal. Tyler came last, hoodie up, dark circles under his eyes, carrying the air of someone just waiting for comfort. I didn't start with threats, I started with honesty. I invited you here today not to argue. I haven't changed my decision about Grandma Margaret's estate. Everything remains in the Eleanor Margaret Legacy Trust and will stay protected. My mother closed her eyes and sighed. Then what's the point of this meeting? Because I have a proposal, I said, placing a set of documents on the table. I won't use Grandma's inheritance to pay off anyone's debts, but I'm willing to offer financial help from my own savings with clear terms and strict limits. My father frowned. What terms? I looked at Tyler. You will check into a proper gambling rehab center for a minimum of 90 days. I've already booked a spot at the Ellison Recovery Center starting next Tuesday. If you drop out early, the support ends immediately. Tyler's eyes widened. Who do you think you are, forcing me into rehab? I didn't flinch. It's not rehab, it's a high-end treatment center. If you still want someone to save you, then you better show you're willing to save yourself first. I turned to my parents. As for you, I'll offer a one-time financial package to help you restructure your debts. But in return, you'll agree to sell the current house, use the proceeds to pay off high-interest loans, and attend financial counseling sessions with an independent advisor I choose. You want us to live like poor people? My mother snapped, voice filled with indignation. No, I want you to live like adults who take responsibility for their actions. No one said anything for a moment. I pulled out another document. Here's the breakdown of my support. The total I'm willing to offer is $75,000 from my personal savings, not the trust. My father opened his mouth to protest, but Annette stepped in, voice steady. If you agree to the conditions, we'll sign a notarized support agreement. If any terms are violated, Samantha has the right to terminate all assistance without legal obligation. The room tightened with tension. I looked back at Tyler, his eyes no longer defiant, but laced with something close to desperation. I tried to handle it on my own, he mumbled, but everything just spiraled. I don't even know how it got this bad. I know, I said gently, because you've never been held accountable. But this time is different. Uncle Thomas finally spoke. If any of you want to change, this is your chance. If not, then let Samantha live her life. Stop pulling her into this pit. My mother looked up, her once sharp eyes now dulled. You really won't forgive us? I looked at her for a long time. I'm not here to forgive or punish, I said. I'm the only one left thinking clearly in this family, and if I don't set boundaries now, we'll all lose everything. In the end, they agreed. No tears, no reconciliatory hugs, just signatures on paper. But to me, that was the only thing that held weight after years of being manipulated with empty promises. I saw them out in silence. As the door clicked shut, Uncle Thomas gently touched my shoulder. You did it. I smiled, not out of victory, but because, for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for living by my values. 6 months after the final meeting, the lake house on Lake Travis had taken on a completely different atmosphere, not from paint or furniture, but from the air inside. It was quieter, more peaceful. I called it the stillness of healing. Not an ending, but a much-needed pause after a long, bruising journey. Each morning, I started my day walking along the porch, coffee in hand, listening to the water gently lapping against the rocks. The maple trees behind the house had sprouted new leaves, signaling a new cycle. This house, Grandma Margaret's legacy, was now more than a place to live. It was where memories, values, and the boundaries I fought for were protected. Work was still busy, but I no longer chased 60-hour weeks. I had learned how to say no to insincere invitations, unnecessary meetings, and most importantly, the need to earn approval. Tyler, surprisingly, was still in recovery. The treatment center sent regular updates. They said he attended therapy sessions consistently, avoided denial, and didn't dodge responsibility. After 3 months in residential care, he transitioned to outpatient treatment and now worked as a peer coach in a rehabilitation class. I hadn't seen him since the agreement was signed, but last week I received a handwritten postcard. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just trying not to be the kind of person who needs it anymore. My parents had also changed, though more slowly than I'd hoped. They sold the old house and moved into a smaller apartment near Walnut Creek Park. My father, Carl, worked part-time at a small law firm handling basic cases. My mother had joined a community financial counseling group, something she once called a job for failures. We didn't call every week, but we weren't in a Cold War either. We exchanged cards during holidays, checked in politely about health, and sometimes I received photos of them taking walks together. Every time I saw those, I thought sometimes change doesn't have to be dramatic, just quiet, but real. One May afternoon, I cleaned out the west storage room of the house, the one where Grandma Margaret kept old papers, antique books, and family keepsakes. Among the yellowed letters, I found a small tin box with a faded silver sticker on the lid. Samantha, open when you're ready. Inside was an old turquoise necklace, a photo of me with her from 2005, and a cream-colored envelope with delicate cursive. For Samantha, if you choose to walk alone. I sat down, hands trembling slightly as I opened the letter. My dearest Samantha, if you're reading this, it means you've made a decision not everyone has the courage to make, to protect yourself from those you once loved most. This letter isn't to tell you whether you were right or wrong. It's to remind you of something the women in our family have learned the hard way, that kindness should never come with unconditional sacrifice. Family is not a place to lose yourself. Family, when true, helps you become the best version of yourself, not someone's shadow, not someone's wallet. If, at some point, you feel lonely on this path, remember, loneliness is better than being surrounded by people who only take without appreciation. Don't sacrifice yourself to keep peace with those who don't value you. Love always. Grandma Margaret. I folded the letter, tears falling, not heavy, but healing. Every word peeled back layers I had tried to bury. She had known all along, and she had prepared me, not with money, but with the deepest understanding that boundaries are the only shield when love turns into a burden. That evening, I placed the letter in a glass frame, hung it by the fireplace. Below it, in small gold lettering, love does not mean surrender. And I knew the journey I was on, though imperfect and scarred, was the greatest thank you I could give to the woman who taught me that some legacies aren't written into wills, but into the way we hold ourselves together. Samantha's story is a powerful reminder that kindness should never be mistaken for submission. In real life, many sacrifice their well-being, finances, and inner peace in the name of family. But sometimes, true love means knowing when to say enough and having the courage to set boundaries, even if others call it selfish. Protecting a legacy isn't just about preserving wealth, it's about preserving yourself and refusing to let anyone, no matter their blood ties, define the worth of your life. What do you think of Samantha's decision? Would you be brave enough to draw the line like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories about family and self-worth. I'm Lydia Moore, 35 years old, and perhaps the most painful thing I've ever carried wasn't what strangers said about me, but what my father never did. I grew up in Santa Clarita, California, in a home where the living room lights were always on, but praise for a daughter was cold and rare. My father, Thomas Moore, was the embodiment of discipline and reputation. Over the course of 39 years in the defense aerospace industry, he climbed from a design engineer to vice president of engineering at Vector Aero Systems. To him, work was a religion, technology was sacred, and my two brothers were living proof of the Moore legacy. Me? I was something else entirely. My oldest brother, Nathan, was an Air Force officer, handsome, every bit the military man, married to a nurse with two blonde-haired kids. My second brother, Eric, led the testing division at my father's company. Both of them followed the right path, the kind of men my father could proudly introduce at dinner parties. And then there was me. I loved the night. I was obsessed with stars. At 11, I cut up cardboard boxes and wired LEDs to build a model of the Apollo spacecraft. My dad asked if I'd taken supplies from the garage without asking. I didn't answer. I just wanted him to look at it and see something more than a dreamy little girl. I studied aerospace engineering at Purdue, a place my father once scoffed at as not for the overly sensitive. I juggled classes and lab jobs, ate cold sandwiches beside vibration test rigs, and clawed my way through scholarships like someone grasping for air. I graduated with honors, but at the commencement ceremony, our family seats were empty. My mom sent a text, "Proud of you." My dad? Nothing. I accepted a position at Halcyon Dynamics, a commercial satellite R&D center outside Seattle. 4 years later, I was promoted to systems integration lead. By the time I was 32, I became the first woman in company history to hold a title of Director of Orbital Analysis. Yet every Thanksgiving or Christmas back home, he still raised a glass to Nathan for his new base command, or to Eric for expanding the manufacturing line. As for me, Lydia does something with machines in a lab. They say the need for parental validation fades with time. That's wrong. It doesn't fade, it calluses, like your palms after pushing on a door that never opens. Sometimes I wondered if things would have been different if I'd been born a boy. I didn't need him to fall on his knees. I just wanted, just once, for him to look me in the eye and say, "I'm proud of you." But no, I was always too different, too emotional, not cut out for real engineering. Once, I told him I'd been invited to speak at a space technology conference in San Francisco. He shrugged. Must be one of those inspirational panels. I gave a half smile. I was the keynote speaker. In recent years, I'd let the hope die down, but deep inside, a quiet corner refused to go dark. And that part of me couldn't ignore the invitation to his retirement gala, an opulent evening at the Grand Meridian Hotel with farewell speeches, career highlights, and champagne under chandeliers. I wrestled with it for days, held the envelope over the trash more than once, but I ended up opening the drawer by my bed instead, the one where I kept an old photo, a picture I'd held onto for over 20 years, the only photo where he had truly smiled at me. Standing beside me at the citywide science fair when I was 13. I had won first prize that day. He'd placed a hand on my shoulder. A short, awkward touch, but I remembered. He clearly had not. I slipped the photo into a thin wooden frame, carefully wrote a message on the back, and wrapped it in silver gray paper with a black ribbon. Not a large gift, but just enough to make someone pause. Throughout my life, I learned how to sit still while being overlooked. It started at silent family dinners, where my father would turn to Nathan to ask about military training in Florida, or to Eric to praise a new engine line being tested. And me? He often skipped over me like I was just another chair in the room, lifeless, not worth acknowledging. I still remember my father's 60th birthday party. It was a rainy afternoon in March, the house packed with guests, a 3-tiered cake and a jazz band playing softly in the backyard. When he stood to raise a glass and thank everyone, he looked around and began naming each family member. Nathan, my eldest son, carrying on our tradition of service to the country. Applause. Eric, the one who turned my garage into an engine lab, now running the testing division. More applause. Then he paused, looked at me, and said, "And Lydia? Always passionate about high-tech stuff?" A soft chuckle spread from a few guests near the bar. I smiled faintly, lowered my head, and hid my face behind a glass of red wine. 3 weeks later, I stood at the podium of the National Engineering Conference in Denver, presenting my orbital analysis for a $180 million satellite project. After my session, I received an invitation from Defense Tech for a research collaboration. That night, I dined alone at my hotel, reading the email that informed me I had been nominated as one of the top female engineers under 40. No one in my family knew or cared. I once thought achievements would change everything. That if I became good enough, loud enough, my father would have no choice but to recognize me. But to him, every medal I earned was just a knockoff compared to the true Moore legacy carried by my brothers. At a Christmas dinner once, he even said, "Lydia's work is impressive, sure, but engineering's a stretch for a little sister. Takes more time." I didn't argue. I simply set down my spoon and left the table. There was only one time I truly let myself feel fury. It was when my mother, Helen, called to inform me the family was organizing a Moore Legacy celebration at our old church, showcasing career milestones of the Moore men. I paused for a moment and asked, "What about the women?" She sighed. "Lydia, you know how your father is. Don't make this harder." I hung up without saying goodbye. That day, I returned to my lab and opened a confidential file I had been preparing for the Defense Council. My hands trembled as I turned each page, not from work pressure, but because I realized something painful. The worst part wasn't being forgotten. It was being deliberately erased from the story of your own family. I used to think I didn't believe in cutting people off. I believed I was logical, capable of enduring, mature enough to let it go. But over time, I realized My silence had helped enable their disregard. I didn't need to destroy the relationship. I just needed to stop building it. Everything started to shift the night before my father's retirement party. I got a message from Haley, a distant cousin who worked as a freelance journalist in Arizona. We had only met once at our grandmother's funeral. The message contained one link: more legacy, a family of aviation excellence, an article published by Vector Aero's Retired Engineers Network. I clicked it. The article ran nearly 2,000 words, listing every Moore family member who had contributed to the aerospace field. My grandfather, my father, both my brothers, even my uncle, who'd worked as a low-level tech at a tiny aircraft maintenance firm, were mentioned. I wasn't. Not a word, not a footnote, not even a period. I wasn't surprised, but it felt like every ounce of blood had been drained from me. That evening, I sat alone in my Seattle apartment. The streetlights cast pale gray stripes across my living room floor through the window. I picked up the silver-wrapped box I had prepared, the one with the black ribbon, and stared at it for a long time. It was no longer a symbol of hope. It was evidence, proof that I had existed. I arrived at LAX on Friday morning, my gray suitcase rolling softly across the cold stone floor. My head was completely clear, but there was something inside me heavier than any carry-on. The flight lasted 2.5 hours, taking me to San Antonio, where my father had chosen to host his retirement party at a 5-star hillside resort, complete with a golf course, vintage piano, and cocktail reception by the pool. I rented a compact SUV to drive to the venue. The South Texas air was dry and sharp, a stark contrast to Seattle's constant dampness. Every mile peeled back layers of memory. Wounds I thought had healed, but had only gone quiet. I checked in around 3 p.m. The young receptionist smiled and said, "You're here for Mr. Thomas Moore's party, right? He's kind of a legend around here." I nodded. My room was on the top floor, overlooking the central garden where the gala would take place the next evening. I opened my suitcase and took out the gift box I had wrapped back in Seattle. I didn't check it again. I knew exactly what was inside. A black and white photo, a small handwritten note taped to the back of a thin wooden frame, written slowly, deliberately. This gift wasn't meant to stir emotion. It was a piece of evidence, proof of something my father had refused to acknowledge for too long. I placed it on the wooden table near the window. The golden Texas sunset stretched across the box like a soft spotlight. Then I showered, put on a simple dark blue dress, light makeup, and left the hotel to have dinner with the only family member I still kept in touch with, Aunt Caroline. She was my mother's youngest sister, now living in New Braunfels, the only one who had ever dared to say to my father during a family gathering, "Tom, who do you think you are, sorting your kids like cars in a parking lot?" After that, she was quietly removed from the family group chat. We met at a small Mexican restaurant tucked in a quiet neighborhood. She was just the same, silver streaks at her temples, eyes sharp but still gentle. After a tight hug, she looked me over and said, "Lydia, you look different, not older. Your eyes. You stopped waiting." I didn't answer, I just smiled, and she understood. We talked for over an hour. When the conversation turned to the party, she narrowed her eyes. "You sure you want to go?" "I'm not saying it because I'm worried. I just know he won't change." "I know," I replied. "I'm not going for him. I'm going to end this for myself." She nodded. "Then walk in tall, Lydia. Don't lower your head for anyone in that room." I drove back in silence. The Texas sky darkened fast and fell empty. I turned on the radio but didn't play music. What I needed was the space between sounds, the kind where I could hear myself think. The next morning, I woke up at 6:30 without an alarm. My mind was strangely clear. I double-checked my dress, shoes, invitation, and the box. I retied the silver ribbon one last time, careful not to feel anything. No nerves, no anger, no hope. When I walked into the hotel lobby at 6 p.m., the party had already begun. A large welcome sign stood out front in gold lettering, honoring 39 years of legacy, Thomas Moore's farewell gala. Beside it was a portrait of him in his younger years, standing in front of a prototype wing his company had once produced. eyes gazing toward the sky. Inside was a sea of people, former colleagues, industry leaders, lifelong friends, and recognizable names from defense tech magazines I'd grown up reading. I saw Nathan shaking hands with a general, Eric laughing loudly by the bar. My mother was nowhere in sight, and my father, he stood surrounded by men in dark suits, animatedly recounting some past triumph. His laughter rang out, arms gesturing with practiced confidence, eyes bright as if time had never touched him. No one noticed me at first. I quietly approached the registration table, confirmed my name, and was escorted to a table near the main stage. I sat down, placed the gift box in front of me, and folded my arms. What filled me wasn't fire, it was steel. The event unfolded exactly as I had imagined, soft string music playing while guests strolled past the bar, familiar stories recycled about the glory years, and polished smiles colder than the ballroom air. I sat still at my table, eyes scanning the room, not as a participant, but as an observer. At 8 p.m. sharp, the stage lights dimmed slightly, and a middle-aged man's voice echoed through the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please find your seats. We're about to begin the main address, honoring a legend in the defense aerospace field, Mr. Thomas More." A wave of applause swept the room. I heard Nathan's laugh from the front table, his hand slapping the shoulder of a man in uniform. Eric nodded with enthusiasm, as if gearing up for a magic show. My father walked up to the stage slowly, deliberately, like someone who had rehearsed each step to project dignified humility. He wore a sharp black suit, a slate gray tie, and a lapel pin marking 25 years of service to a next-gen jet propulsion program. He smiled slightly, raised the mic, and began. "It's an honor to stand here tonight among those who've walked nearly 4 decades of challenges with me. I'm not someone who expresses emotions easily, but tonight, I want to take a few minutes to acknowledge my family." I sat up straighter, fingers tightening slightly around my glass of water. I wasn't expecting anything, but I listened. My wife, Helen, the one who reminds me to eat greens and schedule doctor visits, even when I claim to be too busy. Without her, I wouldn't have lasted this long. Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. I hadn't seen my mother, but I knew she was somewhere in the shadowy rows of guests. And my 2 sons, Nathan and Eric. He paused. The spotlight gently found their faces, beaming with pride. Nathan, a true soldier, always at the front, unwavering in his principles, the embodiment of loyalty and honor. Eric, perhaps the only engineer I know who can dismantle a machine and rebuild it better than the original blueprint. You've both made me prouder than anything I've ever drawn or built. Thunderous applause. A whistle rang out. I clearly heard someone shout, "Bravo!" from the right side of the stage. Then he stopped. "Of course, not everyone in the family chooses the same path," he smiled. Not at me, but at the crowd. "Some are born to go far, in a more abstract sense." A light wave of laughter, like chairs scraping against marble, swept across the ballroom. A few eyes flicked toward me. No one said my name. They didn't have to. He continued, "To me, family is legacy. A chain of discipline, effort, and direction. Not everyone fits into that model, and that's okay. Each person has their role." Role. The word hit my chest like cold steel. I had thought I could sit through it, hear his words without feeling. I was wrong. It wasn't because he lied, it was because he told the truth, in the most ruthless way. I didn't belong. I set my glass down and rose slowly. Eyes followed me as I walked toward the stage. Not to step up, but to stop at the first stair. The silver gift box was steady in my hands. The stage lights hit the wrapping, casting a cold gleam across my face. I looked up at him. "Happy retirement, Dad," I said, my voice calm like greeting a stranger in an elevator. "From someone who went too far to turn back." I extended the box. He looked down, stunned for a moment. Then he reached for it, his lips twitching like he wanted to say something, but no words came. I turned away, walking across the ballroom, through lingering perfume and the faint scent of champagne. The sounds around me faded, leaving only the echo of my footsteps on the polished stone floor. No one called after me. No objections. Just a long silence trailing behind an act that perhaps no one in that room saw coming. I didn't look back as I walked out of the ballroom. The hotel hallway stretched out like a runway under soft light. Every step away from that stage was a step away from the years I'd spent waiting. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt quiet. A kind of quiet I'd never known. Not from the absence of voices, but because, for once, I no longer had to scream to be heard. Back in my room, I locked the door and left the lights off. My navy meal dress slipped off and pooled at my feet like a shell I had just shed. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time, hair still up, eyeliner sharp, but my eyes held no fire, no tears either. The phone buzzed, a message from Mom. "Leah, what are you doing?" I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, another, from Eric. "You really didn't have to do that." Then Nathan. "You always have to make everything dramatic." I switched to silent mode, slid the phone into the nightstand drawer like dropping a stone into a deep well. That night, I lay in bed and didn't sleep. I just lay there, eyes wide open, chest rising and falling, feeling every heartbeat finally free from the weight of needing to be acknowledged. The next morning, rain fell unexpectedly over Texas. The droplets on the window reminded me of radar screens I watched daily at JPL, but quieter. At 8 a.m., I wheeled my suitcase out of the room. No goodbyes. No send-offs. The receptionist handed me my car key with a professional, empty smile. "Thank you for staying at the Grand Meridian, Miss Moore." I nodded. Words were no longer necessary. I didn't drive straight to the airport. I turned down an old road into the historic part of town to a little cafe I had visited years ago after Grandma's funeral. It hadn't changed. Same faded sign, same creaky wooden chairs. I sat by the window, ordered a hot latte, and watched the rain smear across the street. Then my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated, then picked up. "Lydia," a rough, familiar voice. "My father." I said nothing. "Yesterday, when you handed me that box, you knew people were watching. Was that to humiliate me?" Still silent, he sighed. "I haven't opened it." "Then don't," I said, calmly. "But I will." A pause. "I just don't understand, Lydia. You have a career, recognition. Why?" "Why would I need you to see it?" I cut in. My voice wasn't raised, but the woman at the next table glanced over. "Because you were the only person who ever made me believe I wasn't enough." Silence. "The photo in that box," I said, "was proof that, at least once, just once, you were proud of me. I kept it for 22 years because I thought it was real." He didn't argue. "I don't need an apology. I don't need you to change. I just need you to know the emptiness you left behind, I filled it, not with forgiveness, but with myself." "Lydia." "Goodbye, Dad." I hung up before he could say anything else. The latte cooled on the table. I drove to the airport just before noon. As the plane lifted off from San Antonio, the clouds blocked out the sun. But I didn't fear flying anymore. Not because I'm an aerospace engineer, but because I've lived long enough in emotional turbulence to know just because the sky is unclear doesn't mean there's no way through. That evening, I returned to my apartment in Seattle. Everything looked the same: succulent on the balcony, gray fabric armchair, an unfinished satellite model on the shelf. But one thing was different. Me. I opened my laptop and checked my email, a new message from the National Women in Engineering Conference. We'd be honored if Miss Moore would accept our invitation as the keynote speaker for next month's opening session. I typed my response. Simple, clear. I accept, and this time, I'll say everything. Send. Just as I predicted, he didn't open the gift box at the party. Not because he forgot, because he didn't dare. For my father, control was like breath, the armor he wore each day to avoid facing any real emotion. In front of hundreds of guests, he kept smiling, shaking hands, saying gracious things, as if the daughter who had just walked out of the ballroom had never existed. But I knew, alone in his hotel room at the end of the night, he would open that box, and he would see the photo. That photo I'd kept for 22 years in a sealed envelope, hidden deep in the bottom left drawer of my desk. It was a picture of me and him, taken at the Eisenhower Middle School Science Fair. I was 12, thick glasses, messy bun, gray hoodie, grinning wide. I stood beside the ISS space station model I'd built from toilet paper rolls, scrap wire, and hot glue. What made the photo special wasn't me, it was him. He stood just behind me, one hand on my shoulder, the other holding my first place certificate. And he was smiling. A real smile. Not the polite nod at banquets, not the camera-ready grin for the press. It was an unguarded moment, the kind of look that said I was something he never expected, but couldn't deny. I remember that day clearly. Mom made him come. He didn't want to. He sat arms crossed in the back row, checking his watch. But when they announced I'd won the district-wide prize, the whole auditorium clapped. And he, for a brief second, stood up, didn't say congratulations, just walked over, placed a hand on my shoulder, and posed for that photo with a student reporter. And never mentioned it again. Under the framed photo in the gift box, I placed a small card, just 4 words. I kept this. I'm done. I didn't write anything else, because if after all these years he still didn't understand, then no words would make him. Sunday night, I got another call from Mom. This time, I answered. I know you did the right thing yesterday, but your father? Is he okay? I cut in. In a strange way, she replied, hesitant. After everyone left, he locked himself in the study until 2 a.m. No one could get in. Then he came out with the photo, didn't say anything, just placed it on the center shelf in the living room. I said nothing. I've never seen him display anything of yours before, she added. I think, he remembered. I leaned back in my chair, eyes on the ceiling. It doesn't matter anymore, Mom. A long pause. I'm sorry I didn't step in sooner, she whispered. I know you love me, I said. But now, I need you to know, I love myself too. I didn't want to be angry at her. She was just a product of a system she was never taught to challenge. But I no longer had the strength to explain on anyone's behalf. That night, I pulled out the identical photo I had given him, the extra copy I printed at 16, and placed it back on my desk. Not to remember, but to see clearly. I had once been a girl who dared to dream, and she deserved to be seen, even if no one ever did. The next morning, as I prepared my keynote for the upcoming conference, an email popped up in the corner of my screen from thomas.moore@vecteraarrow.com. Subject, no subject. That photo, I remember that day. I just couldn't keep it, because it scared me. Scared me that if I felt proud of you, then everything I believed before was wrong. I'm not writing this to justify anything. Just to let you know, you were right and I was wrong. No signature, no closing, that was it. I read it twice. Not to confirm regret, just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. I didn't reply. Because when someone has once made you believe your worth was conditional, silence sometimes is the only thing they're forced to hear. 2 days later, while I was in the lab checking data for the new satellite test, my phone buzzed. On the screen was a name I didn't expect to see again so soon. Thomas Moore. I hesitated, then picked up. Lydia. I hear. Silence. I could hear heavy breathing, the quiet creak of leather shifting. Then he spoke. Deeper, slower. I don't know where to begin. But I think I owe you something. I leaned against the edge of the table, phone still to my ear. I didn't call to collect, I said softly. I know. But I need to say this. He paused. I opened the photo, and I remember more than you think. I closed my eyes. That day, I really was proud. So proud. But I was afraid. Afraid you wouldn't be like me. Afraid that my belief in order, discipline, and direction would be thrown off because you were different. I swallowed. Because I'm a girl? You didn't deny it. Maybe partly, but not just that. You didn't seek approval. You challenged things. You pushed against molds. Every time you succeeded, I felt threatened because I didn't understand how you did it. He took a deep breath, and instead of learning, I chose to ignore it. That was my failure. I turned toward the window. Seattle sunlight lit up my desk, reflecting off the satellite model like the glow of a distant planet. I didn't need you to admire me. I just needed you to see me, I said, voice steady, not angry, just plain truth. But you refused, year after year. I know, and I want to tell you something honest. You remind me of your grandfather. I frowned. You mean Everett? Yes. He never acknowledged me either. Said I was blind for chasing technology, for leaving the farm to study mechanics. He told me I wasn't a real man if I couldn't plow a field. I went quiet. I swore I'd never do the same, he continued, and yet I became just like him. For the first time in my life, I heard him look into his past. No defenses, no excuses. I thought you were a complex equation, but the truth is, you were just you, and I didn't bother to learn how to be a father to a child like that. A strange feeling rose in my throat. Not tears, something lighter, as if a stone long lodged there was melting. I didn't forgive him right away, but I didn't hang up. I'll be speaking at the National Engineering Conference next month, I said. Keynote! I know, he answered, quicker than I expected. I saw the announcement. If you don't mind, I'd like to come. I didn't answer immediately. No need to go on stage. No need for anyone to know I'm there. I just want to hear you speak, for real, for the first time. I looked at the floor, then toward the door. Tickets aren't free, I said, trying to joke. I'll pay, he replied with a quiet chuckle, a sound unfamiliar but not unwelcome. After the call, I sat for a few minutes, phone still in hand, unsure how to name the feeling. It wasn't joy, and definitely not victory. It was more like a hollow space, partially filled. That night, I called Mom. You know what? I said when she picked up. I think maybe Dad really wants to understand me this time. On the other end, she was silent. Then she said, I believe that, and I'll go with him to the conference. I sank into the sofa, eyes on the ceiling. Not everything was healed, but some wounds only need to be acknowledged as real to start the process of recovery. And maybe, after years of trying to prove I was right, I could finally step into the next chapter without dragging the weight of the last war. I returned to Seattle on a soft, sunny afternoon. During the flight, I didn't check emails or open my laptop. I just sat in silence, looking down at the snow-worn mountains and the deep lakes below. Something in me had closed, not because I had forgiven, but because I no longer needed approval. 3 days later, I stood on the main stage of the National Engineering Conference, facing over 1,000 engineers, scientists, students, and those who once believed they didn't belong in this field, just because they hadn't walked through a familiar gate. I wore a charcoal gray suit, no bow tie, no jewelry, just a neat stack of printed notes in hand. Good morning, I began, my voice steady. My name is Lydia Moore, and I used to think I had to become a more palatable version of myself to stand here. Eyes looked up from every row, waiting. I once believed that to be acknowledged, I had to hide everything that made me different. My gender, my way of thinking, even how I approached problems. I paused and swept my gaze across the room. But after more than 10 years in aerospace and defense, I've learned the opposite. What makes you different is exactly why you need to be heard. No whispers, no awkward laughs, just silence. And I continued, I grew up in a family where technical achievements were only recognized if they came with a uniform or a legacy name. I used to think if I reached a high enough level of success, I would finally be accepted. I lifted my hand, not for drama, but to stop myself from slipping back into old emotions. But the truth is, if someone needs you to change in order to see your worth, then their approval was never worth anything to begin with. A soft wave of applause began. I didn't pause. 2 months ago, I gave my father a photo he once forgot. The only moment he had ever truly been proud of me. I kept that picture for 22 years, hoping he'd remember. But when I placed it in his hand at his retirement party, I was no longer waiting. I took a deep breath, not because I was emotional, but because I was speaking from my whole life. I'm not telling this story for sympathy. I'm telling it because I know many people in this room have stood where I once stood, overlooked for not following the right path, dismissed for daring to be different, excluded for not fitting the mold. I lifted my chin. But you are not a failure just because you are different. You are the proof of a kind of success the old world never understood, and sometimes walking away from a door that never opened for you is the first step to building a whole new path. This time, the applause lasted longer. I saw my mother sitting in the 4th row, eyes glistening. My father sat beside her, hands clasped tightly, looking at me, not as someone analyzing, but as someone learning how to feel again. I ended the speech with a line I wish someone had told me when I was 16. You don't need permission to be yourself, and sometimes the bravest act is to stop waiting for others to assign your worth and claim it for yourself. As I stepped off the stage, no step felt heavy. I didn't need anyone to run after me. I didn't need anyone to say, you did good. I had already said it to myself. A few days later, the speech video spread across engineering forums. It appeared in an IECA newsletter, in a STEM classroom in California, even on the homepage of a blog for women of color in science. I received hundreds of emails from people I'd never met, but who wrote that they had once felt invisible, the way I once did. A 17-year-old girl named Aubrey from Ohio wrote, I printed your final quote and taped it to my bathroom mirror. I don't know what I'll study yet, but I do know this. I don't need anyone to validate my dreams. I replied with one line, build your road to a place no one thought you could reach, then invite them to watch. And in that moment, I realized I was no longer the forgotten child at a family dinner. I was a woman who had learned, step by step, to rewrite her story. With truth, with pain, and with freedom. Lydia's story is a powerful reminder that you don't need recognition from those who once dismissed you to be worthy. When you stop trying to fit into someone else's mold and start building your own definition of success, you don't just step out of the shadows. You become the light for yourself and for those silently struggling like you. True worth doesn't lie in approval. It lies in the courage to live authentically, even when no one clapped. What do you think about Lydia's choice? Was she too bold or simply brave enough to step out from under her family's shadow? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life. I'm Cora, 35 years old, a software engineer living in Oregon. For most of my life, I believed in the word family, so much so that I once told myself I could endure anything as long as it meant helping loved ones through tough times. But no one warned me that when you're always the one reaching out first, eventually they'll assume it's your duty. It all started 11 months ago when my younger sister, Ellie, 29, and her husband, Greg, asked to stay at my house. Greg had just lost his job, and Ellie had abruptly quit her position as an office assistant after a conflict with her boss. They said they'd only stay for a few months while saving up to put a down payment on a small condo outside Salem. I believed them. I believed in the idea that sisters show up when one is struggling. I lived alone in a 3-bedroom house that I bought after more than 10 years of relentless work and saving. One room was my home office, one for guests, and the other my bedroom. I rearranged everything to give Ellie and Greg the entire lower level. They had their own room, private bathroom, and even a side entrance that led to the backyard. I set the rent at just $600 a month, half the market rate. Enough to help with utilities, but not enough to make them feel pressured. "We just need a few months, sis," Ellie said as she rolled her suitcase in. "We'll be back on our feet soon, I swear." I smiled, hugged her tightly. "You'll have everything you need here. Just be respectful of the space, that's all I ask." At first, things seemed fine, but it didn't take long before their promises thinned out like weak coffee. Greg started freelancing, or so he said. In reality, he played video games and streamed online all day. Ellie spent most of her time scrolling TikTok, posting stories about her relaxed lifestyle, claiming she was still figuring out what kind of job aligned better with her mental health. I'd come home after 8 hours of meetings only to find dirty dishes stacked in the sink, cooking oil splattered across the counter like motor grease. My $300 blender had been taken apart and not put back together properly. Greg had burned a frozen pizza in my oven and left the place reeking of smoke. I had tried to mention things gently. "Greg, could you please rinse the blender after using it? It's a specialty model. I had to order it from San Francisco." Greg shrugged without looking up. "Cora, don't be so uptight. This is a home, not a showroom. We're family, right?" I gave a strained smile, but something inside me began to crack. Then they started inviting friends over. One night, I walked in at 10 p.m. to find two strangers lounging on the newly reupholstered sofa I'd paid for last month. Greg had a beer in one hand and the remote in the other. "Oh, hey, you're back. We're just watching the NFL." When I asked them to limit having guests on weeknights, Ellie looked at me like I'd ruined "Seriously, sis, you need to relax. Why so intense all the time? It's a home, not a corporation. You're not the CEO here." I paid to repair the HVAC system after Greg caused an electrical short installing unauthorized Bluetooth speakers. I also covered last month's utility bill, over $200, because they accidentally left the heat running 24/7 for a full week. One evening, I casually mentioned at dinner that I'd received a quarterly bonus, $4,000, for finishing a difficult project ahead of schedule. Greg laughed. "Nice, maybe we'll stick around a few more months. Who needs rent when you've got a big sis like Cora footing the bill?" That comment, half joking, half blunt, was the turning point for me. I realized they no longer saw me as a sister lending a hand. I had become an unlimited, unpaid sponsor. And the worst part, they had absolutely no intention of leaving. One early December evening, with the cold rain starting to fall, I left work earlier than usual. My last meeting got canceled. I stopped by the bakery near my place to pick up some sugar-dusted ginger cookies and a new bag of coffee. In my head, I had already painted the evening, a latte in hand, a cozy blanket, fireplace glowing. But as soon as I opened the door, laughter floated up from the downstairs level. Ellie's voice, Greg's, and my mom, Miranda, excitedly saying, "The chalet even has a private sauna, Ellie, and there's a ski trail that runs right through the pine forest. We really leveled up this year, didn't we?" I froze in place, still holding the paper bag. A chalet? A sauna? Skiing? I slowly stepped down the stairs and stopped at the basement living room door. Ellie was curled up on the armchair, glowing with excitement, while Greg lounged across the sofa, holding a glass of red wine, my Christmas bottle I had set aside. "Your dad already booked everything," my mom went on. "Idaho's been getting snow early this year, should be a perfect white Christmas. There's even a dog sled tour if you want to try it." I barely heard anything past Idaho. My family always went to Vermont for the holidays, a tiny, warm cabin in the woods, where we'd play board games, make hot cocoa, and argue over whose cranberry jam was better. I'd requested time off 2 months ago, turning down 3 conference invites just to be there, like every year. "Idaho?" I stepped into the room, keeping my voice steady. "Mom, I thought we were still going to Vermont." The room fell into a vacuum of silence. My mom placed her tea gently on the table. Ellie glanced at Greg, then at me, her expression tight, like I'd just ruined everyone's good time. "You're home early. I thought you had late meetings." I asked again, why didn't anyone tell me the plans changed? Mom gave a stiff smile. "Sweetheart, I was gonna call you this weekend. The Idaho resort only got confirmed a few days ago." Greg cut in casually. Didn't we book it back in October? I remember 'cause Ellie and I chose the room with a lake view. The cold outside felt like it had seeped through my bones. I turned to Ellie. "So, everyone knew, except me?" She shrugged, feigning innocence. "You're always busy with deadlines. I thought you'd be glad to just relax for once." I looked at Mom. "And you thought the best way to let me relax was to exclude me from the holiday? Like, Her tone sharpened. "Don't overreact, Cora. You always have to be in control. What time we eat, how the turkey's seasoned. Your dad and I just thought, maybe we try something different this year." I fought to keep my voice from shaking. Who booked the cabin for the past 8 years? Who planned the menu, the playlists, wrapped all the gifts? And this year, I don't even get an invite? Greg sighed and stood up. "Cora, honestly, you're too successful and too intense. Everyone's tired of putting on this perfect family act to fit your schedule. This year, we just want Christmas to be fun." Right then, it hit me. This wasn't some last-minute plan. They had discussed it, agreed, and chose to leave me out. Cleanly, quietly, without a shred of hesitation. I walked out without saying another word. From the kitchen, I heard Mom whisper, "She'll be fine. Cora always lands on her feet." As my bedroom door shut behind me, I set the cookie bag on the desk and sank onto the bed. My heart didn't shatter. It just emptied out. A familiar feeling I thought I had mastered, but this time felt different. I had lived for them. Built a home where Ellie could feel safe. A holiday space for Mom and Dad to escape to. A reason to keep calling ourselves family. And they chose to leave me behind, silently, together, without a second thought. I still remember exactly how I felt waking up the next morning. It wasn't pain or even anger, just a strange kind of clarity, like I had stepped out of a long dream I once mistook for reality. I sat up and looked around the room I used to call home. It now felt more like storage for things I didn't want to face. The kitchen calendar had December 23rd circled in red ink with a messy note. Prep cookies, order turkey, finalize Christmas playlist. I'd written that myself. Written it thinking I was helping create another perfect family holiday. For the past 2 months, I had been preparing in silence. Even bought burgundy pillow covers to match the custom table runner I ordered on Etsy. Just a week ago, I emailed Mom asking if anyone was going vegetarian this year so I could plan the menu. She replied, "I'll ask and let you know." No one followed up. And me? I kept believing things were as they always were, believing they were busy, believing I was still the heart of this family. I opened the storage closet and pulled out the bottom drawer. Carefully wrapped gifts sat in neat rows. A sweater for Mom, a green silk scarf for Ellie, her favorite color, and even that remote-controlled dinosaur Greg once joked about wanting just for display. I'd ordered it on Black Friday to make sure it arrived early enough for perfect wrapping. I touched each one, my fingers brushing against the little tags I'd handwritten. For Mom, may your back hurt less this year. For Ellie, to keep your neck warm and your head even warmer. I'd written those lines, thinking I was doing the right thing. And while I was curling ribbons and tying bows, somewhere across the state, they had booked a resort, confirmed flights, made plans, without me. I stepped into the kitchen. On the table lay a receipt from REI, almost $800 for ski gear. Shipping address, my house. Order date, October 17th. 2 months ago. The same week I took Greg to meet a friend at my tech firm to help him get a job referral. I picked up the receipt, stared at the number, and laughed. A dry, brittle sound even I barely recognized. I had been covering most of the household expenses, and they'd use that money to prepare a trip I was never meant to join. My phone buzzed, a message from Mom. Cora, have you reconsidered? I don't want you to feel excluded, but Ellie really needs space. This trip will help her relax. I hope you'll be mature enough not to make this a big deal. I typed back. For the past 2 months, while I thought I was planning our holiday, all of you were planning yours without me. At the very least, be mature enough to admit that was intentional. I didn't send it. I deleted it. Maybe because I finally knew. I didn't need them to understand. They didn't think they did anything wrong. They thought I was just overreacting, too intense, controlling. In their minds, I wasn't a sister, a daughter, I was a holiday coordinator. And the coordinator's time was up. That night, I FaceTimed Maya, my best friend since college. She was at home in Seattle, glowing Christmas lights twinkling behind her. I didn't explain much, just said, my family's going on a Christmas vacation without me, and they've been hiding it for 2 months. Maya didn't ask why. She simply said, you okay? I stayed quiet. Do you want to come stay with us for a few days? Ethan's here. We just got a new sofa bed. Swear, it's ridiculously soft. I shook my head and smiled. Thanks, but I think I need a few days in my own space to clean some things out, not just stuff. Maya nodded. You know what, Cora? They lost an organizer, but you just found yourself. Worth it. I ended the call and stepped out to the balcony. Snow had started falling gently. This year there'd be no Vermont cabin, no noisy family dinners, no Greg jokes or Mom's always burnt pudding. But I knew this Christmas would be the first I spent not for them, but for me. 2 days after my conversation with Maya, just when I thought things were clear enough for my family to quietly finish planning their Cora-free getaway, they took a step none of us saw coming. It was Saturday night. I had just wrapped up a late online meeting with a European client. The clock on my screen read 9:14 p.m. I left my desk and hadn't even changed out of my hoodie when I heard laughter echoing downstairs. I frowned. My first thought was that Greg had invited friends over for beers again without telling me, but when I came down the stairs and turned the corner into the living room, I froze. The room was packed. Twinkle lights wrapped around the windows and a 7-foot fake tree stood lit in the corner. Silver and gold ornaments reflected candlelight across the space. Near the fireplace, a rustic wooden sign read, "Let the Colorado adventure begin." My mother was by the snack table, holding a champagne flute. My dad, Charles, was laughing with 2 old friends. Ellie spun in a glittery red dress, showing off a fur stole I hadn't seen before. Greg was pouring bourbon into one of my crystal glasses. For a man I'd never met. They were throwing a farewell party in my house. I wasn't invited. I wasn't even told. None of them, not Ellie, not my mother, saw anything wrong. I stood at the entrance, my hand gripping the doorframe. Slowly, eyes turned. The laughter faded. Silence swept through like a cold draft. My mom approached first, speaking in that soft tone people use with stubborn children. Cora, I thought you were working upstairs. We'll clean everything up after, don't worry. I looked at her, then scanned the crowd. Nearly half were strangers, eating on my carpet, drinking from my glasses, standing under the roof I paid for. A farewell party? My voice was low, hoarse from swallowed rage. In my house? For a trip I was deliberately excluded from? Greg scoffed. Don't be dramatic, Cora. We just wanted some holiday spirit. You're being a little sensitive. I clenched my fists, stepping into the room. So it's normal to throw a send-off party in the home of the one person you purposely left out? Ellie looked up, narrowing her eyes. Cora, I get that you're upset, but not everything's about you. People just want to have a good night, okay? I turned to my mom. You're okay with this? Changing plans in secret? Keeping me in the dark, then using my house for the party? My father said nothing. He never did when things got tense. He always chose to hide behind a glass of something. My mother sighed, her voice dipping into that familiar tone of controlled annoyance. You're making this heavier than it needs to be. Everyone's just trying to relax. Don't ruin the evening. Then, from the snack table, I heard a voice. Aunt Angie, one of Mom's closest friends. I think Cora's being a bit much. People went to all this trouble. Can't you just be gracious? Gracious? To the people who hijacked my home and made it a celebration of my exclusion? I didn't respond. I walked straight to the speaker and yanked the cord out. The music died instantly. Whispers started. Greg came closer, sarcasm thick in his voice. Cora, you really want to ruin your family's party over hurt feelings? Grow up. I stared at him. No, I'm ruining a party thrown by people who've been using me. Big difference. No one had anything to say after that. I stood in a room full of relatives and felt completely stripped, like I was in a stranger's house, not my own. Their silence said it all. They didn't believe I had the right to be angry. I was supposed to be quiet, grateful. Keep giving. I took a deep breath. Everyone, please leave my home in the next 20 minutes. Anyone still here after that, I will call the police for trespassing. This is not a bluff. My mother blinked, stunned. You can't be serious. I absolutely am. I turned and walked upstairs. I didn't wait for their response. But I heard the shuffle of jackets being grabbed, quiet mutters of, "She's gone crazy," each word settling in my chest like a stinging layer of dust. That night, I cleaned up every trace of the party. I took down the lights, gathered ribbon scraps, tossed every paper plate and crumpled napkin into trash bags. By the time I wiped up the spilled bourbon from my table, my hands were shaking, either from the cold or fury. I couldn't tell which. The next morning, I sat by the kitchen window, holding a cold cup of coffee, my eyes fixed on the wine stains still soaking into the carpet. Last night, I had stuffed all the trash from that farewell party into 3 large bags, dragged them out back, and tossed them into the bin myself. I didn't sleep, not because it was loud, but because my mind kept replaying the same ticker tape. I've let them push too far for too long. I grabbed my phone and typed a single line to Maya. I need Ethan. 10 minutes later, the phone rang. Maya didn't ask questions. She simply said, "We'll be there in an hour. Have everything ready. Today is the cleanup day." I didn't need to ask what cleanup. Ethan, Maya's boyfriend, is a real estate attorney at a law firm in Portland. He'd helped me review the paperwork when I bought this house 3 years ago, and now he was going to help me reclaim it. By the time they arrived, I had printed copies of my mortgage statements, utility bills in my name, and even scattered messages Ellie had sent me when she first moved in. Lines like, "You're a lifesaver. I promise this is just for a few months. Now, useful as evidence." Ethan reviewed everything and nodded. There is no formal lease, so Ellie and Greg are considered month-to-month tenants. Cora, you have every right to issue a notice to vacate. Under Oregon law, all it takes is 30 days' notice. What about changing the locks? I asked. Ethan exchanged a look with Maya before replying. You can't change the locks while they're still residing in the home, but if you're sure they'll be out all day, you can change them in their absence and leave the necessary items and a legal notice somewhere visible. Just make sure not to hold or discard any of their belongings. Maya jumped in, her tone sharp. They've treated your home like a free hotel for almost a year. Time to take your space back. The plan was mapped out with military precision. They were going skiing and shopping the next day. Ellie had even posted about it online. I would strike then. Maya and I divided the rooms. I handled the bedroom, she tackled the bathroom, rounding up toothbrushes, cosmetics, and spa-like clutter Ellie had spread around. Ethan drafted the official notice of termination, clearly stating the 30-day window, the move-out deadline, and how to retrieve remaining items. I placed 2 suitcases of their essentials on the front porch and covered them with a tarp in case of rain. On top, I taped the notice. Beneath it, a handwritten note from me, brief and final. This is my home, and from today, it is no longer a place for others to abuse kindness. The locksmith arrived right on time. I had all 3 main locks changed, including the keypad on the back door. When he asked why, I replied with just one sentence. I'm taking back control of my life. As soon as the new locks clicked into place, my phone started buzzing non-stop. Ellie was calling. I didn't answer. Greg texted, "You gone crazy? We left for a few hours and you pulled this crap?" I replied with a photo of the notice and suitcases on the porch. 5 minutes later, my mom called. "Cora, what kind of nonsense is this? Ellie's pregnant. Do you even care?" I wasn't surprised. The final guilt card, family love. "I heard you, but that doesn't change the fact that this is my house, and I choose freedom." I hung up. Maya handed me a cup of hot tea, her eyes soft, but not pitying. "You just did what a lot of people don't dare to. Say enough." I stood by the window, staring at the small backyard where I once dreamed of placing a pair of Adirondack chairs to read in during retirement. Now I realized one thing. I don't need to wait for retirement to reclaim my peace. That night, I slept the deepest I had in months. No flip-flop dragging, no Greg's phone blasting music, no burnt popcorn from Ellie forgetting the microwave. Just me and silence. I had just wrapped up an online meeting when my phone started buzzing non-stop. 13 missed calls, 5 unread messages, and a stream of Facebook notifications, a platform I rarely checked. The first message was from Grace, my maternal cousin. "I can't believe what Ellie just posted. What's going on? People are saying you kicked your pregnant sister out during Christmas." I opened the app, my heart pounding. On Ellie's profile was a long post accompanied by a photo of her standing in front of my house. Fake tears in her eyes, hands clutching her belly. The bolded caption read, "When your sister changes the locks and kicks you out during the holidays while you're pregnant." Below were over 300 comments, mostly from mutual friends, distant relatives, and longtime family acquaintances, all sharing the same sentiment. I can't believe Cora could be so heartless. Family is supposed to protect, not punish. She's always thought she was better than everyone. Now she's showing her true colors. I scrolled through the comments, feeling like I was being ripped apart. From the sister who raised her, I had just been redefined as a selfish, cold-hearted monster. Pregnant? No. Ellie had never said a word. Not during any of our arguments, not at the party, not while packing her things. She made it up. Greg had posted 2. His was shorter, but no less toxic. Kicked out without warning. The world should know the truth behind her successful sister mask. Attached was a photo of the notice I taped on the door, conveniently cropped to hide the header and the 30-day timeline. Viewers only saw. Has terminated occupancy effective today. As if I had thrown them out instantly into the snowstorm. I shook with anger. But what choked me more was when my mother, Miranda, shared both posts and added a short caption. "We didn't raise our daughter to be like this." A bullet straight to the heart. No call, no text to ask what happened, just a public alliance with a fabricated story, publicly shaming me to protect the daughter who leached off her sister, then betrayed her in every way. Maya called right after, her voice urgent. "Cora, I saw everything. You are not to respond online, got it? No reacting, no posting. The calmer you stay, the less they can twist." "But I can't let them paint me as a monster," I choked out. "You don't have to argue publicly to prove you're decent. The people who care will come to you. Social media isn't a courtroom." I took a deep breath and nodded silently. An hour later, Ethan called. "Cora, I've drafted the legal response in case they actually try to sue. This is classic emotional blackmail, but you followed every step by the book. Lock change while they were out, proper notice, essential belongings left accessible. It's all backed by photos." "What about the pregnancy claim?" I asked, voice hollow. "No medical proof so far, and even if it's true, the law doesn't require you to provide free housing to a pregnant person without a lease." I slumped into my chair. The house still smelled of cinnamon candles and lemon disinfectant. Outside, a gentle rain fell. Beneath that rain, I knew Ellie's narrative was spreading, like ink on a paper towel. That evening, I got a message from Ms. Marcia, the widow next door I often helped with trash and yard work. Cora, I saw the posts. I know you're a good person. I saw Greg loading up the car. They didn't look surprised. If you need someone to testify, I'm here. I smiled for the first time in 3 days. Maybe Maya was right. The truth doesn't have to scream to be seen. It just needs to stand firm. But I knew the fight wasn't over, and next time they might get dirtier. But this time I wasn't alone. I had Maya, Ethan, and most importantly, me. The version that doesn't stay silent anymore. I turned off my phone and unplugged the router. I needed a quiet night. 2 days after Ellie's post went viral on Facebook, I got an email from someone I never expected to hear from. Aunt Claire, my mom's youngest sister, now living in Eugene. The subject line was just one sentence. Cora, you weren't wrong. I opened it, and each word hit like fire against my chest. I saw Ellie's post, and your mother's reaction. I need you to know this isn't the first time a woman in our family was labeled as too tough, too independent, and turned into a scapegoat for someone weaker, but louder. I used to be that woman, and now I see it happening to you. I can't stay silent anymore. I read it over and over just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. I'd never been close to Aunt Claire. She lived far away, rarely came to family gatherings, usually just sent Thanksgiving cards. But now, these words touched something deep inside me, something even Maya couldn't quite reach, a shared memory of injustice passed down through generations of women. I replied almost instantly. 10 minutes later, Claire video called me. On screen was a woman in her 60s. Short silver hair, round glasses, and a backdrop full of books on psychology and family dynamics. Cora, I just need you to know you're not alone, she began. In 1987, I was kicked out of the house by your mother for refusing to be Ellie's unpaid babysitter. Know what she told me back then? Family means sacrifice, Claire. That word, sacrifice, has always been code in our family. But only for the women who earn money and dare to say no. I froze. I never heard Mom mention that. She wouldn't, Claire replied, not bitter, just coldly factual. Because in this family, if you push back, you're ungrateful. If you stay silent, you're well-behaved. But you did the right thing. And doing the right thing doesn't need applause to have value. We talked for nearly an hour. Claire told me things I'd never known, how my mom often played the reasonable victim, making others feel guilty for demanding fairness. Suddenly, my entire childhood rearranged like puzzle pieces. The way Mom looked disappointed when I won a major scholarship, but Ellie failed to get into college. Her sigh when I refused to buy them a new SUV because Ellie's having a baby. The constant comments like, "You're the strong one, so you need to carry more." That afternoon, I returned to the office, after nearly a week of working from home because of the family drama. As soon as I walked in, my coworker Rhonda waved me over. Cora, come here. You need to see this. She turned her laptop toward me. It was our internal work chat. A former coworker, who had gone to college with Ellie, had posted Ellie's accusation in the company thread, along with the caption, "I can't believe someone I used to admire could act like this." The responses came quickly, but not in the way I expected. Daniel, my team lead, wrote, "I've seen Cora skip 3 company parties to go care for her mom after a fall. I've seen her stay at the office until 9 p.m. doing someone else's job without saying a word. If you think she's cold-blooded, try working with her for a quarter." Barbara, the admin assistant and unofficial team mom, followed up. "Being family doesn't give you the right to mistreat someone and call it love. Cora, if you need someone to speak for you during the staff meeting, I've got you." I was speechless. I had never felt so clearly protected. Not through tears, not through loud defenses, but through real respect from people who'd worked beside me, lived beside me. That same afternoon, I received a bouquet delivered to my desk. No sender name, just a small card. "Everyone deserves boundaries. Thank you for teaching me that. From someone who used to think you were too rigid." It was from Grace, my cousin, who had initially believed the twisted version of the story online. I smiled and placed the bouquet on my desk. In my mind, I could still hear Aunt Claire's voice. Not everyone is ready to face the broken systems they were born into, but once they do, they'll never be the same again. December 24th. Light snow dusted the porch roof. I stood by the kitchen window, hands wrapped around a mug of hot cocoa, feeling oddly at peace. This was my first Christmas in nearly 15 years not cooking for a family gathering. No stressing over planning, no last-minute run for matching napkins, no wondering if my mother would sigh again that my dish lacked traditional flavor. I had ordered a small pecan pie from my favorite bakery. Maya had sent over a box of handmade chocolates, along with a handwritten card. This is the first year you chose yourself, and the first time I've seen you truly free. I had decided not to go home to my parents, not to reply to my mom's forced-sounding Merry Christmas text, not to listen to the usual half-hearted apologies like people make mistakes when they're too emotional. I wasn't emotional anymore. I was clear. A week earlier, Ellie had messaged me, a long paragraph opening with, "You hurt me deeply, but I still hope one day we can be sisters again." I didn't respond. I didn't delete it either. I left it there as a reminder. Forgiveness does not mean surrendering your boundaries. On Christmas afternoon, I wore a green sweater with silver lace trim, rewrapped 2 presents for Maya and Ethan, a cashmere scarf and a set of gold-edged notebooks. I drove to their home in the southern suburbs where their small house always glowed with warm lights and the scent of cookies floated down the block. Ethan opened the door, holding a tray of cookies. "Cora's here. We need someone who can tell real cinnamon from nutmeg." I laughed. "You just insulted the palate of someone who once made a 3-layer egg mousse for a family bigger than a football team." Maya hugged me from behind. "No one deserves the seat by the tree more than you this year. In that house, I wasn't the head chef, the planner, or the one holding together everyone's emotions. I was just Cora. And that was enough." Dinner was simple: garlic butter roast chicken, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie, and barley salad. No one fought over the chicken skin. No one said dessert wasn't sweet enough. No one whispered behind my back when I got up for more water. There was just soft jazz, warm conversation, and eyes that saw me without judgment. When I got home, I saw an envelope in the mailbox from Ethan's law office. It was a copy of the formal response they'd sent to Greg's side after their legal threats. I left it on the kitchen counter beside a scented candle. I didn't feel scared anymore. Not angry, either. Just light. Light like finally dropping a too-heavy backpack after a long journey I never understood why I kept carrying. Late that night, I played instrumental music and hung up the ornament Aunt Claire had given me. My first piece in a new collection I had decided to start, Symbols of Choice. I knew life wouldn't magically become easy just because I set boundaries. Ellie might still play the victim. My mother might remain silent, or worse, keep curating the version of the story she wants people to believe. But I was no longer part of that story. I was no longer the silent sacrificer. I didn't owe anyone an explanation for choosing to protect myself. I was the one redrawing the lines, the one who stood in a house once filled with laughter but empty of love. The one who changed the locks, not to shut people out, but to hold on to myself. Tomorrow, I'll finally rearrange my office, turn it into the creative space I've been putting off. I ordered a new wooden desk, wall mount shelves, and a canvas painting I did last year, a bird soaring against a gray sky, free and unbothered by direction. Maybe that's the image I'll carry into the new year. And if one day Ellie truly wants to rebuild our relationship, she'll have to walk through a door opened by respect, not guilt. As for me, I won't be waiting. I'm busy living my own life, for the first time, not following anyone else's script. Cora's story is a powerful reminder that kindness should never be treated as an obligation, and sacrifice doesn't mean giving without limits. In real life, far too many people, especially women, are expected to endure for the sake of family. But when compassion is exploited, setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's self-preservation. Because sometimes finding real peace means choosing yourself, even if it means walking away from those who share your blood. What do you think about Cora's decision? Was she being too harsh, or was she simply protecting herself? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt stories about family, boundaries, and self-worth.
My name is Piper Emerson. I'm 33 years old. The last time I had Christmas dinner with my family was over 8 years ago, in a red brick house on the outskirts of Minneapolis, where every wall was covered with pictures of my brother Blake, as if the entire house was a shrine to the perfect son my parents adored. From a young age, I knew exactly where I stood in the family. A quiet shadow, easy to overlook. While Blake got a brand new bike every summer, I received hand-me-down running shoes from Mom, the kind she'd bought on Black Friday 3 years prior. Blake was the family's golden boy, football team captain, straight-A student, and always had custom sandwiches packed by Mom for practice. And me? I was once left behind at school during a long parent-teacher night because no one realized I hadn't come home yet. I never said it aloud, but I remember my 16th birthday vividly. Blake got a brand new Toyota Tacoma. Me? Mom handed me a gas station cupcake and said, "I'm busy, you understand, right?" I nodded. I was used to no one really caring. Holidays were always emotionally exhausting. Every Christmas I had to prepare myself. One year, Blake got new Beats headphones, a Nike hoodie he had wanted, and a pair of authentic Jordans. I received a peppermint-scented candle and a pair of wool socks. Dad even joked, "To keep your feet warm while you try catching up with your brother." The way they spoke made me feel like I was some failed project they no longer had the patience to fix. I used to think it was just in my head. But my senior year in high school proved every doubt I ever had. By then, Blake was a sophomore at the University of Michigan with sky-high tuition, fully funded by our parents, including housing and a brand new MacBook. When I asked Mom if I could apply to a design school in Chicago, she frowned and said, "How much can you make with design? Be practical, we're not as financially comfortable as before." "But we had enough for Blake," I said, before I could stop myself. Mom paused for 3 seconds, then replied coldly, "Your brother had a clear direction. You've been jumping from one thing to another. I can't throw money away." I didn't respond. I just remember walking out of the living room, my throat tight, fists clenched around a scholarship application I had spent an entire week writing. When Blake came home for spring break that year, Dad threw a small family party. That gathering burned itself into my memory. During the toast, Dad proudly declared, "We have a real source of pride. Blake, with a 3.9 GPA and an internship offer from General Motors, we couldn't be more proud." Applause erupted. I sat at the corner of the table in silence, my plate of cold salad untouched. No one mentioned that I had just been awarded a full-ride scholarship to a top tech school in Boston. Not one question. Not one congratulation. Aunt Carol even asked what I was doing these days. "Piper's working part-time at a coffee shop." Mom answered for me with a tone dripping in implication. "She's still figuring things out." I remember Aunt Carol's pitying look and her reluctant nod, like I'd just announced I was repeating a grade. In that moment, I realized one thing clearly. I'd have to handle everything myself, and no one in that house truly believed I could succeed, or even deserved to. I didn't enter the world of tech because someone guided me. I stumbled into it like a lost traveler chasing a faint light at the end of a tunnel. One afternoon in March of senior year, while cleaning the school library for a few extra bucks, I found a thin paperback left behind on a shelf. Python for Beginners. I don't know why I didn't return it like the others. I took it home, turned on my desk lamp, and started reading. The first lines of code looked like a foreign language, yet they were strangely captivating. From that night on, I knew I'd found something that made me feel valuable. I started downloading materials, watching free online videos, pulling all-nighters in my cramped room just to type basic code as if my life depended on every keystroke. I didn't have a mentor, but I had something even more important: the will to prove I wasn't useless like they believed. 3 months later, I submitted a full-ride scholarship application to Brighton Institute of Technology in Boston, a public school with a strong cybersecurity program. I didn't tell anyone, not Mom, not Dad, not Blake. I submitted it at 3 a.m. while the house was asleep, and the wind rattled the window panes. 6 weeks later, I received an acceptance letter. I packed in silence. Mom thought I was moving to an apartment near my part-time job. "Don't forget to close the fridge before you leave," she said without even looking up. I didn't blame her. I was used to it. The interstate bus ride took nearly 8 hours. I sat by the window, watching the leafless trees fade behind me. Each mile stripped away layers of old memories, leaving behind a new version of myself, ready to begin again. The dorm was old but warm. My roommate was Talia, a brown-skinned girl from Detroit, majoring in robotics, with a laugh like wind chimes. That first night, we sat on the floor eating instant ramen and sharing secrets only those scarred by family could understand. I worked part-time at a coffee shop on Concord Street near the campus library. Each shift lasted 7 hours. My feet throbbed from standing all day, but every night I still opened my laptop to write code, like a solo warrior training in the dark. In my second year, I landed a summer research grant, assisting on a medical data encryption project in collaboration with a local hospital. It was the first time my name appeared as a co-author on a research paper. I printed it out, tucked it in a notebook. Not to brag, but to remind myself I was on the right path. I graduated with honors at 27. While my classmates posed for pictures with parents and family, I walked out of the auditorium alone, holding a bouquet Talia gave me. But I didn't feel lacking. For the first time, I felt complete. 3 weeks later, I accepted a job offer from Sentinel Secure, a firm specializing in security systems for financial institutions. Within 12 months, I was promoted to lead a project team overseeing transaction security for 3 major banks in the Northeast. What people once dismissed as dry technical work became the backbone of safeguarding hundreds of millions of dollars every day. I wasn't just fixing bugs, I was stopping threats. And that felt more powerful than any praise I had once begged my family for. 30. The company awarded me a personal bonus of $135,000 after my data breach prevention system launched internationally. I used it to buy a 2-bedroom apartment in South Boston, just 4 blocks from the place where I used to wash dishes. I pinned a world map to my wall and marked every place I wanted to go. No family photos, no graduation pictures. Just a whiteboard with a quote I wrote in black marker. "You don't have to be seen to be valuable." I rebuilt myself from scratch, not for revenge, but to never be dependent again. That was the first time I truly understood. Strength isn't in how others see you. It's in knowing who you are when no one's left to cheer you on. I never craved fame. I only wanted peace. A kind of peace I had to fight for. Hour by hour, step by step, with my own 2 hands. At 31, I signed an exclusive deal with an international bank headquartered in Toronto, transferring the security framework I'd spent over 10 months building. They didn't just pay well, they offered a one-time royalty payment of $150,000 after tax. Their legal rep emphasized, "This IP is going to save them millions annually, that number is fair." I didn't call anyone to share the news, I had no one to call. Instead, I sat in my cramped Boston apartment, opened the cheapest bottle of white wine I'd been saving, and played "Here Comes the Sun" by the Beatles. A strange ritual I'd adopted for every major milestone. 2 weeks later, I placed a down payment on a brownstone apartment in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn. A 3-story building with red brick. The unit on the second floor had a tiny balcony that overlooked a garden and a sunlit corner perfect for a workspace. No one went with me to tour the place. I went alone, shook the realtor's hand, signed the contract, and drove my own U-Haul through a drizzly March afternoon. The apartment had nothing but a worn armchair and a desk I bought off Craigslist. But that first night, I slept peacefully. No quiet footsteps in the hallway. No mom's voice nagging in the living room. No one telling me I was delusional for dreaming. I lived simply. Woke at 7 a.m. for a jog around Cobble Hill Park, worked from 9 to 6, occasionally going into the office if needed. In the evenings I cooked, read, studied AI security, and sometimes drew diagrams on the wall for a design I was mulling over. No one pushed me, no one waited for me, and I felt whole. My friends, the ones I chose, not the ones assigned, were all uniquely good and fiercely resilient. Lisa was a lawyer turned carpenter. Jaden, a freelance photographer who dropped out of college to care for his ill mother. And me? I was Piper, the cybersecurity engineer who disappears and reappears, with a product that leaves corporations speechless. We didn't meet often, but when we did, it was genuine. No one asked about Blake. No one mentioned my parents. They understood. Some wounds don't need reopening. Just silence and space to scar over. 8 years had passed, and I hadn't called home once. My mom's number was still in my contacts, marked, "Do not answer." Every holiday, I received the same chilly emails from my dad, things like, "Happy Thanksgiving. Blake says hi." No name, no apology. Nothing had changed. Each time, I'd reply with the same sentence, "Received." No response necessary. I wasn't angry. I just no longer had the energy to hope. Sometimes when I passed the bakery where I once worked, I felt like a ghost who'd died in another life. That messy-haired girl, scrubbing floors in the middle of a snowstorm? She was gone. In her place was a calm woman who knew her worth and no longer needed anyone's approval to confirm it. Occasionally at work, someone would ask, "How come Piper never brings a date to the end-of-year party?" Or, "Where's your family? Do you go home for the holidays?" I just smile and say, "I like keeping things private." And in New York, that answer was enough. People here understand that some silences are sacred. I didn't build an empire to show off. I built a world strong enough so I'd never be shoved out of one again. That's why I kept all my financial assets under an LLC, listed under a college friend's name. A safety net, in case someone accidentally remembered I still existed. One October night, while working late, my phone rang. The screen lit up. "Kayla? Cousin." I blinked. It was a new number. A message followed instantly. "Piper, do you have a minute? It's important. Uncle Henry and Aunt Janice are trying to reach you. They said, the family wants you to come home for Christmas this year." I didn't reply to Kayla's message right away. I left my phone face down on the desk for 2 days. In the meantime, I went about my work as usual. Zoom meetings with Japanese partners, testing the internal alert systems, reviewing every line of code in a patch for a European banking project. But every time I looked up during a break, my eyes lingered on the corner of the screen, where Kayla's name still hovered in an unread notification. On the evening of the 3rd day, I sent back a single message. If they truly want to see me, let them send an invitation. Less than an hour later, an email from my mother appeared in my inbox. Subject: "Come home, the family will be complete this Christmas." The content read like a cold administrative memo. "Piper, we hope you'll come home on the 24th. Blake and his family will be here too. Everyone's looking forward to seeing you after all these years." No mention of what had happened, no hint of remorse, just an order, dressed up as goodwill. I should have deleted it. I knew that. But instead, I sat there, staring at the line, "We hope," and exhaled long and slow. Maybe I needed to face them one last time, not for acceptance, but to finally close a chapter that had always lingered, unfinished, between 2 pages. On December 24th, I drove 6 hours from Brooklyn back to Bloomington, Minnesota. Snow lined the streets. Christmas lights twinkled on suburban rooftops. But house number 7129 looked exactly the same as when I left. Faded beige curtains, a rusted nameplate, and a barren flower bed out front, like a quiet, lasting insult. I rang the doorbell. It took nearly a full minute before footsteps approached. My mother opened the door, her face frozen, like she'd seen a ghost returned from the dead. "Oh, Piper, it's really you. Who else were you expecting?" I said, my voice calm but sharp enough to make her flinch. She pulled me in with a stiff hug. "You look different." The house still smelled of cheap cinnamon spray and vanilla candles, the scent of old Christmases I'd taught myself to forget. The living room was packed. Blake stood in the center, loudly recounting how he almost sealed a major real estate deal. His voice booming like he was the CEO of a Fortune 100 company. "Piper!" Blake called out when he spotted me. "Everyone, look! The mystery guest has arrived. What's the matter, hiding somewhere coding like a hacker?" A few scattered laughs. I pressed my lips together. "Hi, Blake, and no, I wasn't hiding, I was working. Probably in some tech basement, right?" He slapped my shoulder like he was bestowing some honor. "What do you even do now? Reset passwords for people who forget them?" I didn't answer. I glanced at his wife, Jessica, standing a few feet away, cradling her pregnant belly, scanning me head to toe. She leaned in and whispered something into Blake's ear, and both of them chuckled. My mother stepped in. "Just leave your things there, honey. Your old room's now Ollie's playroom. Blake needed an office, so we rearranged. You'll sleep on the sofa in the reading room. It's cozy. There's a fireplace." I nodded. Not surprised, not disappointed, just confirmation of what I'd already known. At dinner, I was seated at the far end of the table, next to the wine cabinet, directly across from the entryway. Blake sat center stage, going on about blockchain for high-end interior design markets. Someone asked what I did for a living. Before I could speak, my mother cut in. "Piper does something with computers. Probably some kind of technician." I set down my knife and fork. "I'm a systems security engineer at Tech. I manage the integration of data protection frameworks for 3 major banks in the Northeast. I was promoted last month." A few seconds of silence, then Blake raised an eyebrow. "Whoa, sounds impressive. Anyway, we're actually looking for funding for a really promising real estate app. If you're free, maybe you can help us with the back end?" "No," I said evenly. "I don't work for free. Especially not for people who don't respect what I do." Blake's face tightened. My mother sighed. "Why do you always have to take everything so seriously? It's Christmas." I smiled faintly. "And today's the day I see clearly. After all these years, none of you have changed." The room fell silent. Jessica cleared her throat. My father looked away, avoiding my gaze. I took a sip of water, then stood up. "I'll clean my plate. After that, I think I'll head out early." "Piper!" my mom called out. "You just got here." I turned, eyes steady. "No, Mom. I've always been here. You just never actually saw me." Christmas morning. Laughter echoed from the living room, the sound of gift wrap being torn and excited screams from the kids. I woke up stiff from the hard reading room sofa, my back sore, neck aching. Light spilled through the frosted window, glinting off the folded blanket my mother had left with the comment, "You used to sleep on the floor when you were little, remember?" I walked out silently, watching the family gathered round the tree, piles of presents under it. Silver paper, red ribbons, shopping bags from Nordstrom and Macy's. Each name was called out with fanfare. "Blake, here's your Patagonia jacket. Jessica, this is from Mom and Dad, the newest juice extractor. For little Ollie, a dinosaur building set and an iPad." Each package came with compliments, cheering, and warm hugs. I stood in the doorway, holding a cold cup of coffee, waiting to hear my name. 1 minute, then 2, then 10. Finally, when everything had been handed out, my mother glanced around and clapped her hand to her mouth. "Oh my goodness, Piper. I'm so sorry, I thought there was one. Maybe it got mixed up while wrapping." Blake snorted, not bothering to hide his amusement. "Just like when we were kids. Remember the year you thought you were getting a game console, Turned out to be yarn and socks? Jessica laughed, adding, "Seriously? Poor thing. But also, kind of funny." I said nothing. I simply stepped into the center of the room, set my coffee down on the table, and pulled out a small, neatly wrapped box from my bag. "I have a gift too," I said, my voice low but steady. "It's for myself." I opened the box. Inside was a hexagon-shaped metal keychain engraved with my name, Piper Emerson, and the logo of a luxury building in Park Slope. I held it up, letting the Christmas tree lights glint off the brushed steel. "This is the key to my new apartment. I closed on it last week." No one reacted immediately, then my mom blinked. "Apartment? Where?" "Park Slope, Brooklyn. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, top floor, balcony overlooking the park." Jessica blurted out, "Brooklyn? That's expensive. Are you renting?" "No," I said, not taking my eyes off Blake's. "I paid in full, no mortgage, used my year-end bonus." The energy in the room shifted like someone had pulled the plug on the music. Blake sat up straight. "What kind of bonus pays that much?" I slowly placed the key back into the box and looked around the room. The security system framework I developed for an international bank was just approved for rollout. The IP rights are mine. After tax, the bonus was $152,000. I used part of it to buy the apartment. Mom stammered, "152 after tax?" "Yes. And that's not my total income for the year." Blake leaned back, arms crossed. "Well, good for you. I mean, who would have thought computers could make that kind of money?" "I did," I replied, a slight smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. My mother seemed disoriented, as if recalibrating her view of me in real time. She sat upright, switching to a sugary tone. "Piper, you should have told us. I'm so proud of you. Who would have guessed you'd be so successful?" "Certainly not the person who told me to wash dishes to learn humility," I answered, light as air but sharp enough to slice through the fake warmth settling around the room. Blake rolled his eyes. "Come on, don't make a scene. We just wanted to enjoy Christmas." "And I just wanted to be treated like a human being." I stood tall. "Not like a shadow hanging around the edges of your celebration." Jessica turned to my mother. "Didn't you say this year was about family coming together?" My mom faltered. Yes, of course, but no one expected I'd be better than what you allowed me to dream of," I said, arms crossed. Silence fell over the room again. My dad cleared his throat. "Piper, you're right. But you have to understand. Back then, we didn't have many options." "There were always options," I cut in. "You just chose Blake. And you chose to believe I wasn't worthy." I bent down to pick up my bag. "It's fine. Because I've learned how to choose myself." I didn't need to stay to witness how their tone began to shift, but I did. I remained for exactly 20 more minutes, as if carrying out a social experiment I owed myself. And, as predicted, once they could no longer deny my success, they started looking for ways to capitalize on it. My mother spoke first. She poured me another glass of eggnog. Sickly sweet and cloying. But her voice was soft, in a suspicious way. "Piper, I'm truly proud. Seeing you grow into this, really, it's incredible. Our family always knew you had potential. It's just, sometimes your father and I didn't express it well." I lifted the glass but didn't drink. "I know. And I didn't come here for a late apology. I didn't come expecting anything." Blake jumped in, perfectly timed like a musician waiting for his solo. "You know," he said, "listening to you talk just now, I was thinking, if you invested in my startup, it could really take off. You understand tech? We've got the market side covered." I turned my head slowly, like I'd just heard English for the first time. "What startup?" "An app that connects real estate listings with small-scale investors. We've got a demo, A site, the idea, we just need initial capital. How much exactly? Around 200 grand, Blake said quickly, as if scared he'd talk himself out of it. But in return, you'd be a co-founder. Profit share? Featured in reports. I laughed, dry, quiet, not a hint of amusement. I just turned down a 10% equity offer from a global bank. And you think I'd pour money into a project with no customers, no legal structure, no patents, and no cybersecurity compliance? Blake's face reddened. That's insulting. You're acting like we're amateurs. You don't need me to insult you, Blake. You're doing just fine on your own. My father stood, his tone losing any pretense of diplomacy. Piper, this is out of line. You think just because you've signed a few contracts you get to look down on your own brother? I set the glass down. No, I think I have the right to protect what I built. You used to tell me to be realistic. Well, I am. And now you say I'm cold? My mother jumped in, trying to salvage control. Piper, listen to me. You're in a good place now. Helping family is normal. Blake just needs a push to get started. If you don't trust him, then trust us. We've always put family first. I looked at her for a long moment, then asked, slowly, where was that family first when I was denied help with college tuition? That was different, you know it was. How? Because I wasn't Blake? No one said a word. No one dared. I slung my bag over my shoulder and stood. This family reunion ends here. Blake clenched his jaw. You're selfish. This family raised you, and now you think you're too good for us just because you made some money. I turned back. One last time. Family isn't a place where people guilt-trip you for expecting basic respect. Family is where people treat you with kindness, without expecting something in return. If that's too much to ask, then maybe we should stop calling this family at all. My mother yelled as I opened the door. You'll regret this. Don't think just because you have money you can say whatever you want. I didn't turn around. I walked out into the December cold and shut the door behind me, like sealing off a rotten chapter for good. On the drive back to Brooklyn, my phone lit up non-stop. Blake, you can't just do this to me. Mom, just a small portion, Piper. The family needs you. Dad, you'll lose everything if you turn your back on blood. I blocked each number. No emotion, no hesitation. At a gas station near Syracuse, I stopped to fill up and splash water on my face. I looked at my reflection in the restroom mirror. No tears, no regrets. I had walked away once, at 23. But this time, I wasn't just leaving the house. I was closing the last door I'd ever kept slightly open. The one labeled Hope. They'll see me one day. I returned to Brooklyn on the evening of December 26th. Snow still drifted lightly, the city still buzzed as if nothing had changed. But inside me, a quiet revolution had taken place. For the first time in years, I felt as though I had finally loosened the invisible collar my family had fastened around my neck since childhood. I took a long hot shower, filled my apartment with lavender spray, then sat alone on my balcony chair, glass of red wine in hand, gazing out at the city lights. No one yelling at me, no one calling my name, just to remind me to behave. No one slicing me down into a version that fit their warped expectations. The next morning, I woke at 8 a.m., opened my laptop and logged into my company's admin system like usual. I hadn't checked email in 3 days, over 100 unread messages. But the one that made me smile came from my direct supervisor. Piper, please read this first, important. I clicked. Happy early New Year, Piper. The board has officially approved your promotion to Global Security Architecture Lead, effective January 3rd. Your new salary package, equity increase, and expanded R&D budget will be finalized this quarter. You've proven not just skill, but grit. Thank you for choosing to stay. Karen. I didn't scream, didn't jump. I simply closed my eyes and took a deep breath. As if I'd finally reached the altitude I was always meant to breathe in. The following week, I met Elijah. No setup, no dating app. I was standing in a tiny bookstore in Borum Hill, holding a copy of The Myth of the Nice Girl, debating whether to buy it or just download it on Kindle, when a low voice beside me said, "The book doesn't tell women to be aggressive, just to be clear." I turned. A tall, lean man with wavy hair, wearing a wool coat and a deep brown scarf. "You've read it?" I asked. "Yeah. Gave it to my sister right after. Still not sure if she felt inspired or insulted." He smiled. I laughed. The first time in days. We had coffee afterward, then crepes on Smith Street. Elijah was a UX designer, originally from Denver, who'd moved to New York 2 years prior, after cutting ties with a controlling, judgmental family. He didn't ask about my past, didn't pry into why I lived alone or avoided holiday talk. He just saw me. No editing, no adjustments, no measuring. 3 weeks later, he moved in. We shared a workspace in the living room, me with my 3 monitors and mini server, him with his cactus, sketchbook and laptop. Some nights I debugged code while he sketched wireframes beside me. Not many words. Just a calm that I'd never known before. At the end of February, I bought a townhouse in Prospect Heights. Elijah stood beside me when I signed the papers, his hand steady in mine. The 2-story home had a small backyard, enough for mint and basil. We named it the Reset Point. A reminder that sometimes you have to wipe everything clean to build something truly your own. In April, we started planning a trip to Japan. Elijah had studied Japanese in college. I was obsessed with shrines and sashimi. We practiced, bowing Kyoto style, learned phrases like, "Thank you for your patience." I never imagined I'd be the kind of person who planned trips like that, not because I lacked the means, but because I once believed I didn't deserve that kind of freedom. Over dinner one night, Elijah said quietly, "I've never met someone as strong as you, Piper." I looked at him. "I'm not strong. I just refuse to live as someone else's draft anymore." I still get a few unknown calls each month, mostly old relatives trying to reconnect after hearing rumors that I'd suddenly gotten rich. I don't answer. I don't explain. I just tag each number under "no response needed" and let them fade like a summer rain. I once believed blood ties couldn't be broken. Now I know. Family doesn't come from genetics. It comes from those who choose to stay, even when all you have left is exhaustion. And with Elijah, I found that truth. I didn't build this life for revenge. I built it so no one could ever trample over me again. And as I look out from the balcony, hand in hand with someone who doesn't need me to change, I know I chose right. I chose freedom. I chose myself. 6 months after that final Christmas in Bloomington, I received an invitation to speak at the Global Data Security Conference in San Francisco. Not as an attendee, as the keynote speaker. I was the lead architect of a leak prevention platform that had just been deployed across 6 major North American banks. I walked on stage in a tailored black suit, the spotlight hitting the front rows, where people who once made me feel small now had to look up and listen. I didn't talk about myself. I talked about code architecture, zero-day mitigation strategy, and how we built systems rooted in trust and transparency, not fear and patchwork. But when the applause rose at the end, I knew I hadn't just presented a technical framework. I had finally buried the shame that once kept me from entering a meeting room without asking permission. That night, I sat alone in my hotel room, 36 floors above the city lights. Elijah called on video from home, asking if I wanted him to book a table at our favorite Italian place for tomorrow. I laughed. "You think I want to celebrate with pasta?" "Not the pasta," he grinned. "It's the way you squint every time the waiter offers more cheese." I didn't need blood relatives to feel like I belonged. I had Lisa, who always said what others wouldn't, but with the tone of someone who stays. I had Elijah, who loved me not because I was obedient or acceptable, but because I knew who I was and didn't need permission to be that. I had my team at Tech, people who trusted me not because I had connections, but because I earned it. line by line, decision. I still get messages from a few relatives, mostly phishing attempts. Your mom says you just bought a new house. Think we could drop by sometime? What? Mike's under a lot of pressure. Maybe a word from you would help snap him out of it? I read them. I don't reply. I'm not angry. I've simply outgrown it. I used to think that freedom required forgiveness. Now I understand. Not everyone deserves it. And peace doesn't always have to be paid for in tears. Some things, you just lay down and walk away from. One Saturday afternoon, Elijah and I sat on the backyard steps, sipping mint tea from our own garden. He was reading, I was sketching an interface for a nonprofit project focused on senior data privacy. He looked up. Do you think they'll ever regret it? I didn't need to ask who they were. I closed my notebook and looked at the open sky. Maybe, I said. But it doesn't matter anymore. Elijah nodded. Because you don't need them? I smiled. No. Because I no longer need their approval to know I matter. That evening, I posted a photo on social media. A small kitchen, warm light, 2 glasses of wine. With a caption. A family isn't where you're born, it's where you're seen and allowed to be. Over 3,000 shares. More than 500 comments from people who'd been rejected, mocked, dismissed, but had rebuilt their lives with their own hands. I didn't want to be an inspiration. I just wanted to live, honestly. Live without bowing to judgment. Live without being told to shrink to fit someone else's frame. If someone were to ask me now whether I still hope my old family will recognize and value me, I'd say, oh, because I've learned to recognize myself, and to walk beside those who never ask me to pay a price for being loved. In the end, I didn't answer with anger. I answered with life. And it's more beautiful than I ever imagined, because it's mine, completely, without compromise, without apology. Without needing anyone's permission. Piper's story proves that true validation doesn't come from blood, it comes from the life you choose to build. When we cut ties with toxic relationships, we don't lose, we're set free. In a world where so many are still chained by family expectations, Piper chose to walk away, define her worth, and choose who gets to stay. It's not just a story of success, it's a reclaiming of identity. And sometimes, real freedom begins with one firm sentence. I don't need your approval to exist. What do you think about Piper's choice? Would you have the strength to do the same? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, real-life stories about family and self-liberation.